Chapter 662. The imperial palace was still tightly guarded, but this time Tang Zhang went straight in because he was accompanied by Li Xiaotian. After passing through the guards, they entered the true interior of the imperial palace. This was the center of the imperial power of the island nation, representing the inheritance and power of this country for thousands of years. There were many ancient buildings with carved beams and painted rafters, and there were many traces of the ancient buildings of Huaxia. This was the imitation of Huaxia back then. Back then, the Huaxia was the center of power in the world, the most powerful country. However, because the cultivators were expelled and gradually walked down the altar, and after experiencing the torment of the invasion war, they became what they were now. Back then, the island nation was a vassal state of Huaxia, paying tribute every year and sending envoys to learn the culture and technology of Huaxia. But now, the island nation no longer put Huaxia in their eyes. This was a sad thing. Tang Zhang had mixed feelings. He followed the crowd through the layers of buildings without saying a word and arrived in front of a magnificent palace. This palace was one size smaller than the palace in Huaxia's imperial city. It was one grade lower, but one could still see its grandeur and magnificence. In front of the palace, the guards had become even tighter. With a combination of light and darkness, Tang Zheng's consciousness moved slightly and discovered that there were many people hiding in the shadows, silently watching him. Although Li Xiaotian was treated as a guest of honor, this group of island nation people obviously did not completely believe her. This was in line with Li Xiaotian's description. Suddenly, Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian were stopped, and Tang Zheng squinted his eyes. Li Xiaotian's expression did not change as he said, "Don't worry, they are just checking if there are any weapons. You don't have to worry about that." Li Xiaotian knew that Tang Zheng had a sumeru bag, and there were too many divine weapons inside. The heaven-shocking bow and shooting sun arrows that she had coveted for a long time were one of them. The characteristics of the sumeru pouch were special. Island nation people could not detect it at all. Sure enough, after the island nation people checked, they bowed deeply to the two of them and respectfully let them pass. "Yesterday, I did not come to this palace. Since I am here today, I will definitely be able to see the emperor," Li Xiaotian said in a low voice. Tang Zheng nodded, thinking that it would be for the best. In fact, he had not completely thought of a countermeasure for what he should do this time. The matter of the warship attacking the island was an order from the royal family, so it was difficult for the emperor to absolve himself from the blame. Perhaps only he knew what was going on. Even if Wu Junshan and the others were captured, he should know where they were being held. Therefore, this act of entering the tiger's den alone was a last resort, but a very necessary method. Although the island country was a small country, the country was too small, and the development of these years was seriously lagging behind. But the other party was, after all, a country, and with the strength of a single person against the strength of a country, even if Tang Zheng was arrogant, he would not be crazy enough to think that he could do whatever he wanted. Without a doubt, if they captured the Sky Emperor alive, everything would be revealed. However, under these heavy guards, it was still unknown whether they would succeed or not. If they were to alert the enemy, it would be even more difficult to find out the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the others from the royal family in the future. In short, he was caught in a dilemma. Counter soldiers with arms, water, with an earth weir. I will act according to the situation. Tang Zheng silently thought in his heart. Li Xiaotian looked at him meaningfully and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing." Tang Zheng was shocked. There was still this black-bellied woman beside him. She was very good at reading people's expressions. If there was anything strange about his every move, she would be able to sense it. Even if he were to make a move later, he could not let her discover it in advance. Otherwise, as long as she shouted, all his previous efforts would be for naught. Li Xiaotian heard the answer, laughed, and did not say anything more. The majestic aura in the palace was even stronger. If an ordinary person were to walk into this palace, they would probably be unable to help but tremble in fear. They would unconsciously feel guilty and lower their posture. However, Tang Zheng did not feel anything strange. The dragon might of the five-clawed golden dragon was many times stronger than this aura. He could already talk and laugh when facing the five-clawed golden dragon. So why would he be afraid of this palace? Moreover, his body also contained the might of a dragon. If he did not intentionally restrain it and let it out, it would definitely cause many people to tremble in fear. Inside the palace, the number of guards in the open had decreased by a lot, but Tang Zheng could clearly feel that the number of guards in the dark had increased. Furthermore, their strength had increased, and he could feel a few powerful auras faintly discernible. If not for his extraordinary perception, he probably would not have discovered the experts in the dark. This imperial palace was indeed a dragon's pool and tiger's den. The defense of the entire country could not be underestimated. Looking up, there was a middle-aged man sitting on the throne of the palace. This person was not tall, but there was a dignified aura between his brows. With a single glance, one could tell that he was not an ordinary person. Could this person be the heavenly emperor? Tang Zheng could not help but take a few more glances. Suddenly, his gaze turned and landed on the throne beneath the other party. The throne's shape was very unique. Pieces of scales wrapped around the throne, and it was as black as ink. However, the strangest thing was the shape of the throne. 9 ferocious dragon heads stretched out in all directions, giving off a strong sense of oppression and fear. Tang Zheng had seen a true dragon before. The 5-clawed golden dragon did not give off a ferocious feeling. Instead, it gave off a brilliant sense of majesty. However, these 9 dragon heads were completely different. In addition to the sense of majesty, they gave off an even more ferocious feeling, giving off a very uncomfortable feeling. This was very different from the design of Hua Xia's dragon throne. For a moment, Tang Zheng could not understand the use of this design. However, because of this throne, he instantly did not have a good impression of the person sitting on it. Not only that, a strong sense of disgust and hostility rose from the bottom of his heart. He hid these emotions very well. The others could not detect the slightest trace of them. Otherwise, if he showed even the slightest trace of hostility, the experts lying in ambush would attack together. Li Xiaotian looked expressionlessly at the middle-aged man on the throne. He was neither servile nor overbearing, and did not say a word. Suddenly, the palace fell into silence. Their eyes met, as if they were waiting for the other to break the silence first. Li Xiaotian was calm and composed. He did not have the slightest fear or unease of being in the middle of the imperial palace. On the contrary, he looked around with interest. The atmosphere became increasingly strange and awkward. Tang Zheng could not understand the thoughts of Li Xiaotian and the emperor, nor could he understand why the two of them had such a reaction. After a long time, the emperor finally opened his mouth. "Holy Maiden of the Li Palace, welcome." It was actually Hua Xia language. Tang Zheng was slightly surprised, but Li Xiaotian was not at all surprised. The island nation had not only studied Hua Xia for a year or so, but had studied it for over 1,000 years. Many of the island nation's languages came from Hua Xia, and the heir apparent of the island nation's imperial family would learn Hua Xia language from a young age. Li Xiaotian indifferently said, "Your Majesty, hello. Let's get straight to the point and get to the main topic." The emperor frowned. "There's no rush. I'm very anxious." Li Xiaotian objected. It had to be said that this conversation caused Tang Zheng to have a whole new level of respect for Li Xiaotian. She came to the depths of the palace alone, surrounded by strong enemies, yet she was able to remain calm and composed, and even refuted the Sky Emperor's opinion. This was too rare and commendable. The emperor's brows furrowed, even tighter. Between his brows, there was no doubt that he was unhappy. Li Xiaotian acted as if he did not see it and ignored it. Fine, then let's begin. The emperor compromised. This is our Li Palace's sacred hand of Xinglin. He will diagnose you. Li Xiaotian pointed at Tang Zheng and introduced him. The emperor's gaze moved to Tang Zheng's body. Since you are the sacred hand of Xinglin, may I ask your name? A nameless person. Tang Zheng had crossed swords with the people of the island nation too many times. He was not sure if his name had already been known by the people of the island nation, so he deliberately concealed his name. Your Majesty, a name is just a code name. Why would a true expert use a name to display their strength? Li Xiaotian tried to resolve the situation. The emperor gave Tang Zheng a deep look, tacitly agreeing with this explanation. Then please come forward. The emperor compromised. Tang Zheng did not know what kind of illness the emperor was suffering from. His medical skills were only half-baked, and he had not even learned the most basic medical knowledge. The life-continuing pill was a heaven-defying pill that did not belong in the scope of medical knowledge. But since things had already gotten to this point, he had no way out. Moreover, the chances of approaching the emperor were few and far between. This was the best opportunity. Take this opportunity to capture him alive. Then everything will come to light. Tang Zheng thought. A distance of 10 meters was not long, but it was not short either. But in this hall, this distance was filled with danger. Tang Zheng could feel that the auras of the experts in the dark had firmly locked onto him. As long as he made the slightest movement, they would definitely kill him. Your Majesty, I have a few questions to ask. Li Xiaotian suddenly spoke again. The emperor's attention was immediately diverted. He looked at Li Xiaotian and asked, "What questions?" "The news of the sinking of your country's warship has spread like wildfire. I wonder if there are any results from the investigation." The emperor's eyelids suddenly twitched. His gaze became exceptionally sharp, like a sharp knife. Tang Zheng's heart thumped. What was the purpose of this woman asking this question? On this matter, the island nation was humiliated. This was definitely an opportunity for the emperor to directly mention this matter. Wasn't this just rubbing salt on the wound and increasing the hostility? He could not guess what Li Xiaotian was thinking, but he could not turn around to stop her. He could only bite the bullet and walk towards the emperor. He raised his head and looked at the emperor, not knowing how he would answer. A trace of anger flashed past the emperor's eyes as he said, "This is a matter of the country. It is not convenient to tell you." "Hee, is that so? But I know a bit of news. I wonder if your Majesty wants to know?" Li Xiaotian said with a smile. The moment these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the hall changed. The emperor leaned forward and asked, "What news?" Tang Zheng's heart fiercely beat. He could feel Li Xiaotian's gaze on his back. It was meaningful and made him feel uneasy. This woman's style of doing things was unfathomable. At this time, what was the purpose of her words? "Shit!" Tang Zheng secretly cried out as his expression changed. Chapter 663. All of this happened so quickly that Tang Zheng had no time to react. There was a wolf in front of him and a tiger behind him. He was in a dilemma. He glanced at the emperor, but his attention was still on Li Xiaotian. He really wanted to know the news that she spoke of. Li Xiaotian glanced at Tang Zheng and said, "Your country's warship sank because someone deliberately sabotaged it." The emperor's eyelids suddenly twitched. This was consistent with the results of their investigation. The large hole on the warship and the traces of battle showed that this was not caused by an explosion. It was caused by manpower and divine weapons. This result caused the royal family to be greatly shocked. A single person with such powerful strength was enough to sink a warship. This was too terrifying. Of course, no one would question this result. The royal family had been around for thousands of years, and they had seen too many miracles. It was not just a legend for an individual to be stronger than this. Therefore, the most important thing now was to find this person. Time was of the essence, and the investigation had yet to conclude. However, Li Xiaotian claimed that he had news, which made the emperor's expression change. Li Xiaotian was like a fisherman throwing down bait to lure the emperor. The emperor had no choice but to take the bait. He was too anxious to know about this matter. Is identical to. Who is it? Far away on the horizon, but close at hand. Li Xiaotian's words were earth-shattering. So far away, yet so close. The emperor glanced at Li Xiaotian and immediately rejected the idea that she was the culprit. His gaze then turned and locked onto Tang Zheng. Other than Li Xiaotian, there was only one other person in the hall, Tang Zheng. Although the emperor did not understand why Li Xiaotian would betray his companions, he still made a prompt decision. The heavenly emperor's gaze became incomparably cold, like a venomous snake spitting out its tongue. He stared straight at Tang Zheng and roared, "It's you? Catch him!" As soon as his voice fell, figures leapt out from all directions of the hall, madly pouncing towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng cursed in his heart. This two-faced woman. He almost believed her, but he didn't expect that all of this was a trap. She knew that she was no match for Tang Zheng, so she pretended to be weak. Then, she lured Tang Zheng into the depths of the palace. Facing so many experts from the island nation, Tang Zheng would not be able to escape. In the blink of an eye, Tang Zheng thought of this, and his face turned ashen. With so many experts surrounding him, Tang Zheng didn't have time to think. He immediately used ground shrink, and the distance of a few meters was reduced to 0. He dodged the attacks of the others and directly arrived in front of the emperor. "Baka!" Roars and roars resounded throughout the hall as beams of cold light shot towards Tang Zheng's body. Tang Zheng didn't care. He knew that at this critical moment, if he didn't catch the Sky Emperor, then he would be trapped in an army of tens of thousands. All of this happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. A faint smile appeared on Li Xiaotian's face as she calmly watched the scene. All of this was her masterpiece, and she was the one who caused Tang Zheng to fall into such a desperate situation. "Tang Zheng, will you be able to escape unscathed this time?" She muttered to herself. Her face revealed a trace of excitement, as if she really wanted to know the answer to this question. Would Tang Zheng be able to escape unscathed? He didn't know, and he didn't have time to think about it. He could clearly feel the monstrous killing intent behind him, as if it was going to tear him apart. He knew that his previous feeling was correct. There were indeed experts among these ambushers, and at least one of them was an expert of the evolved Jing stage. Tang Zheng had dealt with evolved Jing stage experts too many times, so when the other party made a move, he could tell this was one disaster after another. He had to stake it all on this. He didn't even turn his head. His speed was even faster as he attacked the Sky Emperor with lightning speed. The Sky Emperor retreated in panic, but he was sitting on the throne and had no way to retreat. Tang Zheng's hand grabbed the Sky Emperor's neck. With a flip of his hand, the Sky Emperor was lifted up from the throne and blocked in front of Tang Zheng, becoming his human shield. "Baka!" The experts all cursed and retreated. A few of them couldn't retreat in time and almost stabbed their weapons into the Sky Emperor's chest. Tang Zheng was like a killing god. His entire body was releasing a dense killing intent. His eyes were wide open as he stared angrily and shouted, "Retreat, or I'll kill him immediately." With the Sky Emperor in his hand, Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. If he didn't make a prompt decision to not retreat and capture the Sky Emperor as a hostage, he would have fallen into a chaotic battle. The Sky Emperor's expression changed as he roared, "How dare you? You actually dare to capture me?" Tang Zheng's eyes flashed with a fierce light as he slapped his face and said, "Now you are my captive. Without my orders, you are not allowed to speak. Otherwise, I will make your face swell up like a pig's head." Everyone was stunned as they looked at the Sky Emperor, who had a clear handprint on his face. They felt that everything was too unreal, like it was a dream. As the ruler of a country, he was actually captured by an outsider in his own palace and humiliated in front of his own people. This was simply a huge humiliation. The Sky Emperor was stunned and didn't come back to his senses. After a while, he started to shout. This time, he didn't use the Huaxia language but the island nation language. On the verge of collapse, he finally subconsciously chose his mother tongue. Tang Zheng didn't understand what he was saying, but it definitely wasn't anything good. Since he didn't listen, then there was no need to be polite with him. Tang Zheng originally didn't have any respect for the Sky Emperor. Instead, he was filled with enmity. Since there was such a heaven-sent opportunity, then wouldn't it be a waste if he didn't punish him? Moreover, the island nation and Huaxia were old enemies. If he slapped the Sky Emperor a few more times, then he would get back some interest from the invasion of the past. He suddenly had an idea. If there was a reporter who recorded this scene and spread it around the world, then the effect would be even better. The island nation's fate would be completely destroyed. In a short period of time, not only the royal family, but even the people wouldn't be able to raise their heads. Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up and praised, "What a powerful character. He can often do unexpected things. At this critical moment of life and death, he still did such a shocking thing. If he wasn't a cultivator, I really wouldn't want to spend so much effort to be his enemy." She faintly sighed and thought in her heart, "Unfortunately, his identity as a cultivator is destined to be my enemy. Even the experience of going through thick and thin together in the past can't change all of this." The Sky Emperor stopped his clamor because Tang Zheng gave him a few more slaps on the face. He was about to go crazy. This person's guts were too big. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. The Sky Emperor was also such a smart person. At this critical moment, provoking the other party was not a wise move. Instead, it would provoke the other party's anger. In the end, the one who would suffer losses was himself. However, he still used his extremely angry eyes to stare at Tang Zheng, as if he wanted to swallow him in one bite. Tang Zheng ignored him and shouted at the crowd, "Back off a little. Don't block the way. Otherwise, your Sky Emperor will go to see King Yama." Everyone looked at each other and had no choice but to back off a little. This is a wise move. Who exactly are you? You dare to come to my island nation and stir up trouble? One of the people in the crowd used Huaxia language to ask. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as his gaze locked onto this person. This person's aura was too strong. Tang Zheng could tell at a glance that he was the powerful master-level warrior that he felt. This person should be around 60 years old. He had a white beard under his nose. He wore a set of warrior's clothes and wooden clogs. There was a katana at his waist. His gaze was gloomy and his aura was terrifying. Who I am is not important. What is important is that you must honestly tell me what I want to know. Otherwise, even if I die, I will drag your Sky Emperor down with me." Tang Zheng said fearlessly. In the midst of tens of thousands of soldiers, he was calm and composed. This calm and composed demeanor of a great general was impressive. However, the people of the island nation only felt fear and anger. Where did this freak come from? Many people subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian. Wasn't this person brought by him? Could it be that these two people were in cahoots with each other? Many people of the island nation had already taken small steps and surrounded Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian did not retreat an inch and said indifferently, "You have found the wrong target to deal with me. Your enemy is him. As for his name, I can make it big for you. He is called Tang Zheng. I think you are not too unfamiliar with this name. However, many experts of your country have fallen in his hands." Li Xiaotian really sold out Tang Zheng completely. Back in the 100,000 Mountains, Tang Zheng had killed many experts of the island nation. Li Xiaotian knew very well that Li Xiaotian knew the feud between him and the island nation. "You are Tang Zheng." As expected, the Sky Emperor and the great master martial artist cried out in alarm at the same time. It was obvious that they were not unfamiliar with this name. The island nation had always paid attention to the collection of information about Huaxia. How could they not know about this new rising star of Huaxia? As for what happened in the 100,000 Mountains, they were not too clear about it. This was because Tang Zheng had done it very cleanly. No one came back to report. So the people of the island nation did not know that all of this was related to Tang Zheng. Seeing that his identity had been exposed, Tang Zheng was angry and regretful. He had been possessed and actually believed in Li Xiaotian. Could this woman's words be trusted? Now, you know that you have been tricked. You are in a desperate situation. You are probably going to die. Seeing Tang Zheng fiercely staring at him, Li Xiaotian met his gaze and charmingly smiled, saying, "Tang Zheng, don't blame me." Tang Zheng coldly snorted and cursed in his heart, "It would be strange if I don't blame you. I still want to kill you. If you fall into my hands in the future, I will definitely not be merciful. Even if you have a glib tongue, don't think that I will believe you." But it was too late to think about all this now. The most important thing was to solve the problem in front of him. Since that was the case, then Tang Zheng had nothing to hide. The fingers that were grabbing the Sky Emperor's neck tightened. The Sky Emperor gasped for breath and almost suffocated. Chapter 664. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. No one doubted the truth of his words. This person was extremely daring. There was probably nothing in this world that he did not dare to do. No one dared to use the Emperor's life to test his courage. "All right, we will answer truthfully. Don't hurt His Majesty the Emperor." The martial artist said, "Why did your warship attack that island?" Tang Zheng asked, "Are you here for this matter?" "I'm the one asking you, not you." Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows and said, unhappily. The martial artist was shocked and quickly advised, "Don't hurt His Majesty. I'll answer you, because the intelligence shows that there are people on that island who are a serious threat to the safety of our country." Information? Tang Zheng was extremely suspicious. Where did the information come from? "This is a secret. I don't know either." Tang Zheng laughed coldly. "Hee, is that so? Since you are unable to give me an answer, then as the ruler of a country, you should know, right?" As he spoke, he lifted the Emperor up. Woo! The Emperor immediately let out a suffocating whimper, his face turning purple-red. "You will tell me, right?" Tang Zheng asked with a smile. The Emperor nodded with difficulty. "Only then can I save my life." Tang Zheng smiled in satisfaction and put down the Emperor. The Emperor greedily gasped for breath and said with fear, "This is what the Imperial Advisor told me." "Imperial Advisor? Who is the Imperial Advisor?" Tang Zheng asked puzzledly. "You are a foreigner. Of course, you don't know the Imperial Advisor. The Imperial Advisor is the person with the highest cultivation in our country," the Emperor said with some pride. It was enough to make the ruler of a country proud. This showed how powerful the imperial advisor was. Although the island nation was a small country, it was still a country after all. The imperial advisor was definitely not an ordinary person. How did he know that there are people on that island who threaten your country? Tang Zheng asked. According to what Marshall said, the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the others were extremely secretive. Furthermore, they were in the vast ocean and would not be easily exposed. How did the imperial advisor know? The more questions Tang Zheng had, the more he felt that this matter was confusing. Hearing this, the heavenly emperor shook his head with difficulty. I don't know either. How could Tang Zheng believe him? He said angrily, You're the ruler of a country, yet you don't know anything. Are you a good-for-nothing? Anger appeared on the emperor's face, but he didn't dare to say anything. He said, I have never doubted the imperial preceptor. If he doesn't tell me, of course I won't know. Tang Zheng looked at him suspiciously, but couldn't find any clues after a long time. So he said, Then quickly call the state preceptor and ask him where he got this information. The state preceptor's residence doesn't have a phone, so we can't contact him. F***CK. Tang Zheng really wanted to curse. What kind of society is this? Why are you still so antique? Since that's the case, then you can only blame your bad luck. Tang Zheng fiercely said, What do you want to do? The heavenly emperor panicked. Tell your men to send a message to that nuisance state preceptor, find out what happened, and then come back to ransom him. You want to kidnap His Majesty. When everyone heard this, they were both shocked and angry. This person's guts were bigger than the heavens. The kidnapping of a country's ruler would definitely cause a huge uproar. At that time, the entire country would lose face, and the royal family would be criticized by the people. All in all, there would be a lot of negative effects. No, don't even think about leaving the imperial palace today. The martial scholar angrily objected. Tang Zheng laughed in disdain. If you don't want me to leave, then let him accompany me in death. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Move aside. Tang Zheng held the emperor and moved forward step by step, forcing everyone to retreat. Li Xiaoyan's eyes flashed as he fanned the flames. You're just going to let him take the emperor away like this? You brought him here, so you can't absolve yourself from the blame. Catch her. Hearing this, the grand master martial artist squinted at Li Xiaotian and ordered. Everyone quickly surrounded her, but Li Xiaotian was calm and collected. She crossed her arms as if she didn't find the danger at all. He looked at the emperor with a smile that wasn't a smile. The emperor glanced at Li Xiaotian and yelled, Stop! You're not allowed to hurt her. Your Majesty, they are in cahoots. The martial master reminded him bitterly. Shut up. Pass down my order. You're not allowed to be rude to Miss Li. The emperor gnashed his teeth and ordered. Everyone looked at each other. Although they had no idea why the emperor would give such an order, they could only obey unconditionally. Tang Zheng looked at Li Xiaotian with a meaningful gaze. You're so good to her. What's the relationship between the two of you? What do you think? Li Xiaotian chuckled. Li Xiaotian, I've taken a tumble for trusting you. I'll remember this. I'll learn from my mistakes. I'll settle this debt with you in the future. Tang Zheng coldly said. You want to settle the debt with me? Do you think you still have the chance? I have the emperor in my hands. Do you want him to die? Li Xiaotian walked towards Tang Zheng and said, To others, he's the ruler of a country. But to me, you're my main target. Everyone else has to take a step back. Miss Li, stop. The martial scholar immediately stopped Li Xiaotian. The emperor is our emperor. I won't let anyone endanger his life. Li Xiaotian indifferently said, His life is already in danger. So You've already failed in your duty. The martial scholar thought in his heart, isn't it because you brought Tang Zheng's men? Otherwise, how could there be such a huge mess? You really want to kill me? Seeing Li Xiaotian's resolute attitude, Tang Zheng asked. Of course, cultivators are really a headache. Li Xiaotian rubbed her forehead, faintly sighed, and said with a headache, Then the next time we meet, I won't show any mercy. Tang Zheng said without any trace of politeness. I don't think there'll be a next time. Li Xiaotian was filled with confidence. Since all of this is a trap set by you, does that mean that treating the emperor's illness is also a lie? Humph, you're really scheming. Using the emperor's illness to lower my guard. Tang Zheng laughed at himself. He was truly too foolish and naive. Back then, he had thought that if he could find out what kind of hidden illness the Sky Emperor had, then it would be a serious blow to the island. It turned out that it was all his wishful thinking. Li Xiaotian smiled as he shook his head. No, you're wrong. I didn't lie to you about this. The emperor is indeed sick, and it's a hidden illness. Am I right, Your Majesty? An awkward expression flashed across the emperor's face, but he did not deny it. Tang Zheng deeply looked at him. From his expression, he could tell that this matter was most likely true. Li Xiaotian, you're simply too good at lying. 70% is fake and 30% is true. It's impossible to tell. Tang Zheng hatefully said as he finally recognized this woman. She was black-bellied to the extreme, just like a beautiful snake. She had a strong camouflage ability, and if one was not careful, they would be bitten to death. Li Xiaotian did not mind, and smiled. Many thanks for the praise. I accept this evaluation. He suddenly changed the topic and said, Everyone, if His Majesty is kidnapped, then you failed in your duty. Do you think you have a chance to live? Everyone immediately understood the meaning behind his words. If the ruler of a country was kidnapped right in front of their eyes, then it would be their negligence. This was different from other crimes. This was a death sentence. If they forcefully attacked to save the emperor and something happened to him, then they would also be sentenced to death. If they attacked, they would die. If they retreated, then they would also die. Since the result was the same, then they would naturally choose to fight. What if they managed to save the emperor? No one had thought of this point before. Li Xiaotian had pointed out the mystery in one sentence. It could be said that he had put in a lot of thought into this, and was also abnormally ruthless. Tang Zheng's head thumped as he immediately understood this point. He secretly cursed at the ruthless woman, and his hand that was grabbing onto the emperor's neck tightened. Right now, the chances of him using the emperor as a hostage to escape were very slim. What followed was a tough battle. Chapter 665. This set of sword techniques that caused Li Xiaotian to turn pale with fright was of course the wind-chasing sword technique. The essence of the wind-chasing sword technique lay in its exquisite sword moves that did not even consume innate qi. Tang Zheng knew that he was facing a fierce battle and would consume a lot of energy. By using the wind-chasing sword technique, he could reduce the consumption of innate qi and obtain more advantages for himself. The essence of the wind-chasing sword technique was fully displayed by Tang Zheng. In the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 people had fallen under his war soul sword. Immediately, everyone felt as if they were facing a great enemy. They had never seen such an exquisite sword technique before. However, no one retreated. Instead, they charged forward wave after wave, as if they did not care about their lives. Tang Zheng was methodical. As he attacked, he grabbed the Sky Emperor and walked towards the entrance of the main hall. That great master has not made a move yet. These people are, at most, pre-celestial stage warriors, so they can't do anything to me. The key is that great master is the biggest threat. Tang Zheng thought silently. His gaze swept across. Why did he not see any trace of that great master warrior? Tang Zheng was overwhelmed with shock. His gaze was like a scanner as it swept across the place once again. There was still no trace of that person. Something's wrong. He became alarmed and had a strong sense of unease. At this time, the great master would not run away. There must be something wrong if he suddenly disappeared. A few enemies attacked again. Tang Zheng did the same thing and waved his War Soul sword to block. Block! The War Soul sword collided with a person's katana. The huge recoil caused his arm to go numb. Before he could understand what was going on, the katana was like a poisonous snake rushing straight in and slashing at his shoulder, almost piercing through his chest. Tang Zheng's eyes instantly widened. This slash was too unexpected. He did not take it seriously at first, but he did not expect it to be so powerful. He immediately locked onto his opponent. It was a young man with a strange smile on his face. The other party was so young. How could he be so strong? This attack was comparable to the attack of a great master warrior. Tang Zheng's eyes glowed. He endured the pain from his shoulder and held the emperor even tighter. Obviously, the other party's intention was to make him let go, but he didn't do as the other party wished. The other party seemed to have realized that his plan had failed, but he was not discouraged. He raised his hand and slashed down with his blade, preparing to launch another attack. Don't even think about it. Tang Zheng roared. He had just been tricked by him. So how could he make the same mistake again? The War Soul sword struck out like lightning. This strike was not the wind-chasing sword technique, but the flying immortals from heaven. With the support of the innate chi, the power of the War Soul sword increased greatly. The terrifying pressure caused everyone to feel a strong pressure, and their movements involuntarily became slower. However, the young man wasn't affected too much. His expression only became serious. With a low roar, a faint light appeared on his katana. Saber light. This person's saber technique had actually been trained to such a high level, to the point of being able to refine a saber light. This was a realm that many warriors dreamed of. Tang Zheng didn't even need to look to determine that the other party was in the great master realm, but why didn't he notice such a powerful expert just now? Could it be that his ability to conceal his aura was also top-notch? He didn't have time to think about it carefully as the War Soul sword and the katana collided once again. The intense sparks and terrifying aura caused the two of them to involuntarily take a few steps back. Their eyes met, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes. "You're so young. Why are you so powerful?" The other party's voice was very low, like a black cloud pressing down on his head, making him feel very uncomfortable. Tang Zheng's heart moved. This voice was too familiar. Wasn't this the voice of the old man in the great master realm? "It's you. So you changed your appearance?" Tang Zheng suddenly realized. When he was in the northeast mountain forest, he met a ninja who knew genjutsu. This person was definitely a ninja and could use some genjutsu to confuse people. He didn't notice that he was mixed in with the crowd. If his luck wasn't good enough, he would definitely have fallen into his hands. How sinister. Tang Zheng said coldly. When the other party realized that his identity had been seen through, his face fluctuated, and in the next second, he returned to his original appearance. "You were lucky just now, but you won't be so lucky next time." The person sneered and retreated. The others quickly moved forward and surrounded him, causing him to disappear into the crowd. Tang Zheng secretly cursed. This person used ninjutsu again, changed his appearance, and hid in the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack. Damn, shameless enough. Since it's like this, then don't blame me. Tang Zheng originally wanted to rely on his own strength to charge out, but now all of this had become unrealistic. He could already see from afar that there were many people gathered outside the hall, a sea of people. It could be said that it was too difficult for him to escape from such a sea of people. The others didn't know what he meant, and once again rushed over crazily. Boom! With a loud sound, a huge monster suddenly appeared in the hall. The floor directly shattered under its feet and flew in all directions, hitting many people, causing them to scream and fall to the ground. Everyone was dumbfounded as they raised their heads to look at this gigantic creature. What was this thing? Why did it suddenly appear here, as if it had fallen from the sky? Li Xiaotian stood at the periphery with a shocked expression on her face. She muttered, "I almost forgot that he still has the help of the four symbols venerable. However, even though it's big enough, it's still a conspicuous target. It won't be that easy to escape." As soon as the four symbols venerable appeared, the situation of the battle immediately changed. Tang Zheng leaped, jumping onto the body of the four symbols venerable, and then disappeared into his chest. He had already killed the Mikado and thrown him aside, and he wholeheartedly controlled the four symbols venerable. This four symbols venerable was the combination of four symbols venerable, and its power was more powerful than the previous four symbols venerable alone. Both its attack power and resistance were significantly higher. It was all thanks to the four symbols venerable that he was able to escape from the world of spirits and souls unscathed. If he could escape from such a dangerous world of spirits and souls, then escaping from the Kokyo should not be a problem. Tang Zheng was very confident. However, he had no choice but to use the four symbols venerables. The four symbols venerables had always been his final line of defense. He was unwilling to use them unless it was a matter of life and death, especially when he was under the gazes of so many people. Such a commotion was too great and too eye-catching. Tang Zheng controlled the four symbols venerable. His head had already passed through the roof of the hall, and he had a panoramic view of the Kokyo. Countless reinforcements were coming from all directions. Not only were there warriors, but there were also modern soldiers, all armed to the teeth. "We can't stay here for long. Let's leave first." Boom, boom, boom. The four symbols venerable strode out of the hall. Immediately, the hall was reduced to rubble under the four symbols venerable's feet. The ancient building that had stood there for hundreds and thousands of years was destroyed just like that. Some people who didn't know what was good for them charged over. All sorts of weapons were thrown at the four symbols venerables, but they only caused sparks. The four symbols venerables remained unscathed. Every time the four symbols venerables kicked out, someone would be smashed to pieces. Screams were heard everywhere, and the situation took a turn for the worse. The side that had the advantage in numbers was now the weak side. Before the four symbols venerable, they were like chickens, unable to withstand a single blow. Clang! With a single punch, Tang Zheng tore down the door of the main hall. He barged his way through and violently rushed to the plaza in front of the main hall, causing everything to become spacious. "Don't let him kidnap the Mikado. Stop him." The Grandmaster warrior reverted to his original appearance. He emerged from the crowd and shouted hysterically in the island nation's language. At the same time, he soared into the air like a bird and attacked the four symbols venerable. The katana shone brightly under the sun, reflecting the sun's rays. A terrifying pressure covered the sky and covered the earth. Tang Zheng locked onto the opponent and snorted. "I let you escape just now. Now that you have nowhere to hide, let's see how you're going to escape." With a thought, the four symbols venerable's giant hand reached forward. Ka! The giant hand firmly grasped the katana, and the dazzling light immediately disappeared without a trace. The Grandmaster warrior was shocked. He wanted to pull the katana back, but found that he couldn't move it at all. He immediately had an ominous premonition. He threw away the katana and flew back. It had to be known that back then, a single four symbols Venerable One was enough to contend against a great master martial artist. Now that there were four symbols Venerable One combined, its power would naturally increase greatly. Moreover, Tang Zheng's control over the four symbols Venerable One had already reached the point of perfection, allowing the four symbols Venerable One's power to be displayed to the extreme. Want to escape? No way. Crack! The katana was crushed into pieces by the giant hand. Then, with a wave of the hand, the pieces flew all over the sky like hidden weapons, heading straight for the Grandmaster Warrior's back. The Grandmaster Warrior turned pale with fright. He knew how dangerous it was behind him without even turning his head. He could only desperately circulate his power in an attempt to dodge the attack. Poof! He dodged most of the pieces, but eventually a piece shot into his back and came out of his abdomen, bringing with it a mist of blood. He staggered and fell from the sky. He couldn't help but let out a scream. "Stay here!" Tang Zheng roared. He waved his giant hand and caught the Grandmaster in midair. When the Grandmaster fell into his palm, he bounced off the ground and jumped out. Tang Zheng wouldn't let him do as he wished. He closed his fingers and immediately surrounded the Grandmaster, holding him tightly in his palm. "Don't you know ninjutsu and take advantage of the situation? Let's see how you're going to escape like this." Tang Zheng mocked him. He knew very well what a Grandmaster Warrior meant to a small island nation. It was already difficult for Hua Xia to cultivate a Grandmaster Warrior, let alone an island nation. This was also why there was only one Grandmaster Warrior in the huge palace. It was because they were so rare that they could be called national treasures. The national treasure of an island nation was Tang Zheng's enemy. Therefore, he didn't pity them at all. He only had one thought: destroy them. The missile was very powerful, but this big guy was not to be trifled with. It easily dodged the missile attack and even detonated the missile, causing it to lose its power. Before Tang Zheng could rejoice, he heard the sharp sound of something breaking through the air again. This time, it was not one missile, but three. Tang Zheng really wanted to say, "Thank you for thinking so highly of me to actually launch 3 missiles at once." This made things even more difficult. Tang Zheng ran. The four symbols Venerable's huge body ran for a long distance in the Kokyo. Everyone dodged, leaving a mess along the way. The Kokyo was completely destroyed because of this. He wondered how much the people of the island nation and the royal family would feel. In any case, Tang Zheng did not feel bad at all. With the missiles chasing after him, he could not care less. Moreover, the more the people of the island nation felt bad, the happier he was. The more he destroyed, the better. The 3 missiles were faster than the 4 symbols Venerable. In the blink of an eye, they were right behind the 4 symbols Venerable. The 4 symbols Venerable took to the air again. Its huge body flipped nimbly in the air, dodging 2 more missiles. Suddenly, Tang Zheng screamed as the 3rd missile changed its trajectory midway. He did not have time to dodge, and only heard a loud explosion. A huge recoil pushed him forward. The 4 symbols Venerable's huge body fell to the ground with a loud crash, sending dust everywhere. The cheers were thunderous. The others jumped up and down excitedly, screaming in a language they could not understand. With the missiles hitting the big guy, everything was settled. The other party would not be able to escape. Li Xiaoyan's brows relaxed, and a smile gradually appeared at the corner of her mouth. She looked at the remaining 2 missiles that turned back in the air. She believed that no matter how powerful the 4 symbols Venerable was, if he was hit by those 2 missiles, he would be badly injured even if he did not die. Then she could really rest easy. Tang Zheng lay in the 4 symbols Venerable's chest in a daze. His qi and blood were in turmoil, and blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. His body felt like it had been run over by a huge truck. His bones creaked, and he could fall apart at any time. He was hit. Those were the words that popped up in his head. D****. Can I still move? He tried to move his arm. Fortunately, he could still lift it. Although his body felt like it was falling apart, it was not, and he still had the ability to move. Suddenly, he took a deep breath. His ears pricked up, and he looked into the distance. Immediately, his eyes emitted a terrifying gaze. He cursed F***ck again. You're getting excited, aren't you? He did not have time to control the four symbols venerable to turn around. He hugged a pillar beside him and roared, swinging the pillar with force. Whoosh! The crowd immediately burst into an uproar. Each and every one of them excitedly waved their weapons and attacked Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng did not reject them, and continuously waved the War Soul Sword, displaying the essence of the wind-chasing sword technique once again. The exquisite sword moves knocked down the enemy again and again, and he actually relied on his own strength to push forward a few meters. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Li Xiaotian said in disappointment, so many people can't even stop him. Even though she said that, she did not dare to step forward. Instead, she hid far away. She was very clear that, at this moment, Tang Zheng hated her to the bone. If she rushed forward, Tang Zheng would definitely attack her, without caring about anything, and kill her. With her intelligence, how could she voluntarily send herself to the door to become a ghost under the sword? Although he is a good-for-nothing, after all, there are many people. We can exhaust him to death by taking turns. Ha! Ants swallowing an elephant. This scenery is really good. Li Xiaotian raised her eyebrows, showing her seductive manner. The corners of her mouth raised a trace of arc, and she muttered to herself. Tang Zheng's footsteps became slower and slower, and the threats from all directions became more and more numerous. Even though he had great abilities, facing such a sea of people, he was powerless. Fortunately, he was using the wind-chasing sword technique, so the consumption of his innate qi was slow. Moreover, he had the Sky Emperor as a human shield in his hand, who could occasionally block a few attacks for him, causing the enemy to be wary of attacking him. Looking from afar, reinforcements continued to pour in from all directions. Furthermore, the rumbling sound of propellers could be heard from the horizon. The helicopter had arrived. With the combined attack of the air and land, he would be even more passive. Could it be that this is my Waterloo? Am I going to die in a foreign land? He laughed at himself. His gaze turned and looked at the Sky Emperor in his hand. He had already awakened, but he was like a marionette. As Tang Zheng's arm moved, he did not have any of the majesty and demeanor of the Sky Emperor. He was in an extremely sorry state. Humph, even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Tang Zheng said, hatefully. When the Sky Emperor heard those words, his face became even paler as he said, let me go and I will spare your life. Right now, you are a captive. You should be begging me to spare your life. However, you are the Sky Emperor of an island nation. If I die, having you accompany me in death would not be a waste of my life. I have done a good deed for Huaxia. Tang Zheng laughed maniacally. Chapter 667. Seeing that Tang Zheng was not afraid at all, the Sky Emperor's face turned ashen, knowing that he was doomed. Kill! Tang Zheng mechanically waved his War Soul Sword, taking away one life after another, but the number of enemies kept increasing, and he could not kill them all. His body was also covered in blood, and blood dripped down his clothes to the ground, leaving behind a long trail of blood. Suddenly, a flame lit up in the distance. The flame soared into the sky, even covering the scorching sun in the sky. Thick smoke rose into the air, and many people turned their heads to look. It's on fire. Quickly put out the fire. The imperial palace was an ancient building. Most of it was made of bricks and wood, and many of the buildings were connected to each other. As long as one place was on fire, the other places would quickly be affected. Therefore, many people turned around and rushed towards the fire to put out the fire. Another place is on fire. Screams rose one after another, and flames rose into the air from different places one after another. Thick smoke billowed, enveloping the imperial palace. Arson! The smart people immediately realized this. If it wasn't arson, then there definitely wouldn't be so many places that caught fire one after another. Li Xiaotian frowned. Looking at the flames in the sky, he exclaimed. Luring the tiger away from the mountain, someone came to save him. Marshal, it must be that woman. She is too daring to take such a risk for Tang Zheng. She really doesn't want to live anymore. Her expression changed greatly. She did not expect this. She had schemed for a long time, but in the end, she had missed this point. In fact, although she knew that Marshal's cultivation was higher than her own, she was not really afraid of Marshal, because she knew that many times Marshal's strength did not represent everything, and schemes were often more useful than Marshal's strength. She originally thought that in the depths of the palace, with Marshal's strength, no matter what, he would not be able to stir up any waves, much less give Tang Zheng much help. But she never thought that Marshal would actually use this move. This move could be said to have hit his weak spot. The Kokyo was like the emperor. It was the symbol of the power of the island nation. It was also a belief and perseverance in the hearts of the people. If the Kokyo was burned down, it would definitely cause a strong reaction among the people and shake their beliefs. Emperors could be passed down from generation to generation, but the Kokyo could not be replicated. If it was destroyed by fire, even if it was rebuilt, it would be difficult to rebuild the faith of the people. Li Xiaotian didn't understand this, which was why she miscalculated. With someone going to put out the fire, the pressure on Tang Zheng was greatly reduced. His counterattacks became stronger and stronger, and his advancing speed became faster and faster. The enemy retreated in defeat, and their momentum instantly weakened. His aura immediately surged, and the flames of despair once again ignited in his heart. His eyes lit up as he looked in the direction of the flames. Who set the fire? For a moment, he couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, whoosh! A beam of white light shot out from the direction of the fire. Wherever it passed, it immediately turned into a sea of fire. Xiao Bai! Tang Zheng exclaimed. The fire was actually set by Xiao Bai. Yesterday, he was still thinking that if he set the Kokyo on fire, it would definitely be very refreshing. He didn't expect that this little fellow would know his thoughts and actually do it. Not good. Suddenly, his brows trembled as he realized another point. Xiao Bai is by Marshal's side. If it came to set the fire, then with Marshal's temper, it would definitely come. Didn't I repeatedly warn you not to let her get involved? I told her to run away as soon as she saw any movement. This foolish woman, she actually rushed in without caring about anything. Sigh. He had 1,000 thoughts running through his mind. For a moment, he didn't know whether to criticize Marshal or praise him. The more critical the moment of life and death, the more one could see a person clearly. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. For Marshal to be able to overcome the difficulties and come to save him without hesitation, this already explained everything. Although he wanted to blame him, he couldn't say it out loud. Sure enough, not far behind Xiao Bai, there was a tall and beautiful figure. She was like a phoenix bathed in fire, so bright that no one could look straight at her. Li Xiaotian also saw Marshal. His eyes immediately emitted a cold gaze and shouted, "Stop her!" Someone immediately went forward to intercept Marshal, But Xiaobai was like a warrior. She opened her small mouth, and monstrous flames spewed out from her small mouth, turning the world in front of her into a sea of fire. The enemy immediately turned into a flaming man, screaming miserably as he rolled on the ground. Marshall quickly passed by these people and came to Tang Zheng's side. Looking at the wounds and blood on Tang Zheng's body, her face became very ugly, and she asked with concern, "How are you?" Tang Zheng grinned and revealed a carefree smile, and said, "I won't die. Why are you here? If I don't come, what will you do? I can't let you be trapped here alone, but I can escape." Marshall said resolutely, "Doesn't this mean that both of them are trapped?" "Humph, that's better than being trapped alone." Marshall said disapprovingly. He turned his gaze and saw Li Xiaotian hiding behind the crowd. His gaze turned cold as he said, "Did she betray you?" Tang Zheng also looked at Li Xiaotian and laughed bitterly. "This is all her trap. I trusted her. This is my own fault. I already said that her words can't be trusted. Yeah, I should have listened to you long ago." Marshall was slightly startled. He looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression and said, "It's not too late now. Who is this?" "The Sky Emperor, my captive." Marshall was not frightened by the identity of the Sky Emperor. Instead, he was beaming with joy and said, "It's good that we caught him. The whereabouts of Master and Mistress are confirmed." Tang Zheng wanted to explain the matter of the imperial advisor to her, but this was not the right time, so he chose to remain silent. Xiaobai jumped onto Tang Zheng's body, scratched his hair, and bared his teeth as he pointed at the flames in all directions, as if he was asking for credit. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and said, "I know that all of this is thanks to you. Xiaobai is the strongest." Xiaobai was like a child being praised by his parents. He was so excited that he danced with joy, looking comical and cute. The flames around them were gradually extinguished, and the enemies surrounded them once again. "Marshal, take him with you. I'll deal with these people," Tang Zheng said. Marshal did not argue and took over the Sky Emperor. Tang Zheng took the lead and stood proudly. The War Soul sword in his hand disappeared and was replaced by the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. When Li Xiaotian saw the two weapons, his eyes immediately blossomed with a blazing light. His palms itched, and he wished that he could immediately rush up and take the two divine weapons for himself. But she knew that the moment Tang Zheng pulled open the heaven-shocking bow, its attack power was even more terrifying than the War Soul sword. Thus, she decisively floated backwards without the slightest hesitation. This was Li Xiaotian. He judged the situation, made a prompt decision, and did not hesitate. His temperament had been cultivated to the point where he was almost emotionless. This was the outstanding trait of the Holy Maiden of Li Palace. This was the trait that the person who had experienced countless eliminations and finally sat on the Holy Maiden's throne should have. However, the other island nation people did not have Li Xiaotian's trait. Seeing that the flames were extinguished, they crazily launched another attack. Wang! Tang Zheng gently released his fingers, the bowstring trembled, and the shooting sun arrow turned into a ray of light and shot out. Whiz! To Tang Zheng, the sharp sound of something tearing through the air was like heavenly music from the 9 heavens. He could hear it to the extreme, but to the enemy it was a death sentence. Wherever the shooting sun arrow passed, the air would tremble, and the people of the island nation would be unable to move, as they were enveloped by the powerful aura of the shooting sun arrow. Boom! 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 The shooting sun arrow pierced through the chest of the first island nation person, then the second, the third, the fourth. The shooting sun arrow continued forward, as if there was no end to it. Chapter 668. F***CK. Do you think that I can't do anything to you just because you're flying in the sky? Tang Zheng spat out a mouthful of saliva and pulled back his bow, aiming at the shooting sun arrow. The people on the helicopter obviously didn't think that the arrows would be a threat to them and ignored them. The flames from the machine gun became even more intense, causing a cloud of dust to rise from the ground. Tang Zheng didn't panic in the face of danger, like a god. He wasn't affected by the series of bullets at all. Instead, his hands became even steadier. Wong! The shooting sun arrow left the bow, its speed faster than a bullet. In the blink of an eye, it rose into the air and accurately hit the fuel tank of the helicopter. Boom! With a huge explosion, the helicopter turned into a ball of flames. Little White kicked off Tang Zheng's shoulder like an arrow that shot into the sky. Not long after, it landed on Tang Zheng's shoulder. In the end, there was an additional shooting sun arrow. Tang Zheng patted its little head and praised, "Xiao Bai is so smart. We can't stay here for long. Let's go." Seeing that the biggest threat had been eliminated, Marshall heaved a sigh of relief and urged, "Let's go." The two of them escorted the Emperor and quickly turned into a nearby street, blending into the crowd and disappearing without a trace. The Kokyo was in chaos. Li Xiaotian stomped his feet in hatred. His perfect plan had gone down the drain. The next time he wanted to deal with Tang Zheng, it would be even more difficult. "Marshal, this woman is really dead set on Tang Zheng. She doesn't even want her own life. Moreover, he has people like Wu Junshan behind him. He will only become stronger in the future." Li Xiaotian shook his head. He felt that his future was not good. Making an enemy out of Tang Zheng seemed to be a huge mistake. So what if it's a mistake? He is a cultivator, and cultivators are the natural enemies of martial artists. This is what the palace master taught me since I was young. How can I be like Marshall, going back on my words and going against my original oath and decision to mix with cultivators? Li Xiaotian's eyes were firm, not wavering in the slightest. No one would have thought that the one who hated cultivators the most would be the Li Palace, and not the martial organization that seemed to be incompatible with cultivators on the surface. This was one in the light, and one in the dark. The layout was deep and far-sighted, causing others to be unable to fathom it. "Asgard, Mistress ordered me to come to the island. She only said that there was a very important matter. Could it be the matter of the martial monarch mountain that Tang Zheng mentioned?" Li Xiaotian muttered to himself, resisting the urge to call the Asgard mistress. Since the palace master didn't want to tell her, there must be a reason for it. She wasn't stupid enough to ask. This was also why she was so surprised when she heard Wu Junshan mention Wu Junshan and the others. It was because she truly did not know about this matter. After Wu Junshan and the others left the martial sect, their whereabouts were very strange. Li Xiaotian was also curious and wanted to investigate, but there was very little information in this area. She wanted to do it, but she was powerless. But now, from the little clues, she gradually made her own judgment. Thinking of Wu Junshan, the dispirited look in her eyes gradually disappeared. Her eyes became bright, and her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Wu Junshan, if I really find him or even catch him, it will definitely be a rich and colorful stroke in my life. In the Jianghu, the Li Palace's position will rise to another level, completely surpassing the martial organization, and even comparable to the mysterious Azure Dragon Hall. This thought made her palpitate with excitement. Not only would this benefit the Li Palace, it would also benefit her. Although she was the holy maiden of the Li Palace and the future successor of the Li Palace Master, she was still young, without enough achievements and qualifications. Even if she inherited the position of Palace Master in the future, it would be difficult to convince the masses. Without a doubt, the merit of capturing Wu Junshan would solve all her problems and shut the mouths of others. "You are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, Li Xiaotian?" Suddenly, a voice broke her reverie. She unhappily raised her head and frowned at the person who came. This was a woman. To be exact, it was a beautiful woman, a woman who didn't lose to her. This wasn't just referring to appearance and temperament, but more importantly, strength. For a woman of similar age to her to have such strength, she could be said to be a dragon among men. "Who are you?" Li Xiaotian smiled, the displeasure and hostility in her heart quickly disappearing without a trace, replaced by a bewitching smile. The person who came was as stiff as a statue, rigidly saying, "The imperial tutor invites you." She didn't answer Li Xiaotian's question, but the two words imperial tutor completely attracted Li Xiaotian's attention, causing her to temporarily ignore this question. "You are from the imperial tutor's residence?" Li Xiaotian asked in surprise. The imperial tutor's residence was one of the most mysterious places in the island nation. Its degree of mystery far surpassed that of the imperial palace. In fact, the imperial palace was not mysterious to the masses. It was in the eyes of the masses. Even if outsiders couldn't enter the depths of the palace, it had been there for thousands of years, and the masses had accumulated a lot of understanding of it. On the other hand, the imperial tutor's residence was a name that the masses had never heard of, just like the three great organizations of Huaxia, which the average person had never heard of. The imperial tutor's residence was as mysterious as the Azure Dragon Palace. Everyone had only heard of its name, and no one had ever mentioned to outsiders what kind of existence it was. Those who could enter and leave the imperial tutor's residence were all tight-lipped, and there was even a saying that disaster came from the mouth. The Li Palace's intelligence network was spread all over the world, but even they knew a little about the imperial tutor's residence. But one thing was certain: the imperial tutor's residence was the imperial tutor's residence, the place where he trained his disciples and subordinates. It was one of the most dangerous places in the island nation, far more dangerous than the imperial palace. Since the imperial tutor invited her, Li Xiaotian naturally wouldn't refuse, and was even somewhat excited. She could finally touch upon this place that others couldn't understand. Of course, as the fearless holy maiden of the Li Palace, even though the imperial tutor's residence was very mysterious and the imperial tutor was very powerful, she still wouldn't feel any fear. Hearing Li Xiaotian's question, the person meticulously replied, "Yes." Li Xiaotian curled her lips and said, "Do you only know these few words?" The person acted as if she hadn't heard and turned to leave. "She has even more of a temper than I do." Li Xiaotian helplessly rolled her eyes and then confidently followed. Before leaving the imperial palace, she couldn't help but turn her head to take a look. The imperial palace was still burning, but much of it had been extinguished. But under the thick smoke, the imperial palace was in a mess, almost completely destroyed. This ancient building that had stood for thousands of years had been destroyed in a single day by Tang Zhang. What a troublemaker. First the warship, then the imperial palace. He really wants to turn this country upside down. The people of the island nation are probably on the verge of crying. Although she said this, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. It was obvious that in the depths of her heart, she really didn't have a good impression of this country. On this point, she didn't lie to Tang Zheng. Li Xiaotian was proud by nature, and this pride was also expressed in her attitude towards this small country. Although the island nation had no lack of experts, she believed from the bottom of her heart that the island nation was far inferior to Huaxia. Li Xiaotian wasn't wrong. The people of the island nation were indeed on the verge of crying. The Li Palace was a kind of belief in their hearts. With the Li Palace destroyed, their belief was on the verge of collapse. This kind of despair and grief was unimaginable. The whole country fell into deep pain, as if they had experienced a national disaster. The people walked onto the streets and gathered at the imperial palace, wanting to see what had become of the imperial palace. When they saw the mess of the imperial palace, many people knelt in front of the imperial palace and cried bitterly. They were sadder than if their parents had died. The internet was immediately filled with pictures of the imperial palace's current situation, which were transmitted to every corner of the world. The island nation had already announced to the outside world that this was a kind of crazy terrorist attack. The island nation would definitely carry out a fatal revenge attack against the initiator of this. The governments of various countries spoke out one after another to condemn this kind of terrorist act, but the people of many countries were secretly happy. 100 years ago, the island nation's invasion of the outside world had indeed attracted too much hatred for their own country. Some of their actions had even deviated from the values of the general public, such as the crazy actions of hunting whales every year. This time, the island nation had really lost face, and it had been completely disgraced. The people of the world saw it as a big joke. The people of the island nation marched on the streets, condemning the government's inaction. They wanted the people in power to step down, and they even apologized with death. The whole country gradually fell into chaos. However, all of this didn't end because, whether it was intentional or not, the government concealed the news of the emperor's abduction. The ordinary people only knew that the imperial palace had been destroyed. The government's plan was clear in the eyes of all the observant people. If the public knew that the emperor had been captured, it would cause even more turmoil and chaos. This was one of the things that the island nation government was most afraid of. The island nation government's wishful thinking was very good, but there was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. A few days after the incident, the news of the emperor being abducted gradually appeared on the internet, and there was no trace of him. In the beginning, not many people believed this news. They thought that some people with ulterior motives wanted to stir up trouble and take advantage of the situation. However, to the public's surprise, the news quickly spread like wildfire, not only on the internet, but also in real life. Moreover, the details of the incident were described in great detail, as if they had personally experienced it. If the other party was making it up, it definitely wouldn't be so realistic. Therefore, all of this could be true. This really caused an uproar. The people of the island nation went crazy. They rushed onto the streets and attacked the government. They wanted the government to give them an explanation, or let the emperor appear to give them an explanation. Then, this rumor would naturally collapse and disappear without a trace. However, things didn't develop as the people expected. Instead, it developed in a direction that they were very afraid of. The government dragged it out again and again, only comforting them. However, the emperor still didn't appear, causing the people to panic more and more. Gradually, everyone believed this matter. The emperor was really captured. This time, not only the island nation, but the whole world once again paid attention to this. This was the ruler of a country, the leader of a country, being captured in his own palace. This was simply a great humiliation. National disaster. This was a real national disaster. The people of the island nation didn't feel like their parents had died. Instead, it felt like their entire family had died. Many people had completely collapsed. They sat outside the ruins of the imperial palace all day long, like walking corpses. Chapter 669. The instigators of all of this, Tang Zheng and Marshall, seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The island nation used all of its resources to find the three of them, but found that it was all in vain. The bustling Tokyo was a tourist paradise. Every year, it would receive a large number of tourists from all over the world. Due to historical reasons, the people of the Western Empire enjoyed treatment that citizens of other countries could not compare to in the island nation. At the entrance of a 5-star, luxurious hotel, a Westerner swaggered into the hotel. The doorman respectfully greeted him. This was already a regular customer. He had been staying in the hotel for the past few days. Even the doorman remembered this face. The Westerner arrogantly nodded, as if he did not see the doorman's greeting. The doorman kept smiling as he watched the Westerner walk into the hotel. The Westerner sat in the electric hall and arrived at the luxurious suite on the upper floor. After the door opened, a face appeared behind the door. It was a Chinese face. If Li Xiaotian was here, he would definitely be unable to help but exclaim a name. Marshal. The person at the door was the marshal that the island nation had racked their brains to find. It was as if Marshal had disappeared from the face of the earth. She actually swaggered into the most prosperous five-star hotel in Tokyo. No one would have thought that she would be so bold, and no one would have expected that she would be able to escape layers upon layers of searches and surveillance. Of course, more people would be curious. How did she do it? Who was this Westerner? The Westerner asked, "How is he?" It was actually Hua-Xia language, and it was very pure. Marshal nodded and said, "Just now, he was a little restless and wanted to escape. After I took care of him, he became obedient again." The Westerner sneered and said, "He has already escaped so many times, but he still hasn't given up. After all, he is the emperor. His temperament is far more resolute than ordinary people." Marshal said, "Fine, then let him escape. He will eventually despair." The Westerner shrugged indifferently and said, "How is it outside?" Marshal asked. The Westerner chuckled. "It's getting more and more chaotic outside. I really didn't expect that this time I would accidentally cause such a big mess. It's enough for the people of the island nation to drink a pot." Wu said meaningfully, "It's not just a pot. I saw the reports on TV. This country is almost in chaos. This is just a facade. The island nation is not damaged at all. Given time, they will rise again. It's just like when they were bombed by the Western Empire's atomic bomb. The whole country mourned, but it didn't take them many years to rise again, even faster than the Hua-Xia. There are many qualities in this nation that are worth learning and thinking about." The Westerner shook his head and sighed. After a short pause, he sighed. "Hua-Xia has a deep foundation and too many unique advantages. But because of this, they are often not good at cherishing and reflecting. So, in fact, there are many aspects of the island nation that we can learn from." Wu was obviously not interested in this question and changed the topic. "What should we do next? We can't stay in the hotel forever, right?" "Of course not," the Westerner said mysteriously. "During this period of time, I have been quietly observing the changes. Although the island nation is in chaos, our goal is to save your master and the others. So, the key is to find their whereabouts. According to the emperor, only the imperial advisor knows the whole story. But the result of my inquiries over the past few days is that there is no such person. Ordinary people don't even know of his existence." Wu was not surprised and said, "In Huaxia, ordinary people are not aware of the existence of the three major organizations. This situation is similar in every country." The Westerner nodded and continued, "The emperor is unwilling to speak. We also don't know where the imperial advisor is. So, all of this has temporarily reached a dead end. Don't you know the soul search technique? If we use the soul searching technique on him once, wouldn't everything be solved?" Wu suggested. The Westerner shook his head and smiled bitterly. "He is still useful to me. This method won't work for the time being. We can only think of another plan." After saying that, he lowered his head and pondered. Wu was helpless and silently walked away. He walked into a room and saw a person lying on the bed. He did not move at all, but his eyes kept rolling around. No one knew what he was thinking. This person was the emperor who had been abducted. Your acupuncture points have been sealed by me. Don't even think about escaping. Wu sat on a chair at the door and said coldly, "Got it." Suddenly, the Westerner cried out in surprise and shot up from his chair with a whoosh. He stared straight at him and asked, "What can we do?" "National Security Bureau." The Westerner snapped his fingers and said, "National Security Bureau." Wu repeated curiously, "What can the Dragon Group do to help?" "Don't you remember the island nation's royal family that I caught in the Changbai Mountains? He is the emperor's younger brother and was later handed over to the National Security Bureau, Su Ingtian. The National Security Bureau's understanding of the island nation is not just a year or so. They definitely have a lot of information that I don't know. Perhaps the Imperial Advisor is one of them." Wu rolled his eyes and thought that it was feasible. He said, "You are from the National Security Bureau, so you can try this method. But let me tell you, the emperor must not be handed over to the National Security Bureau." So this Westerner was actually Tang Zheng. He deliberately used an illusion technique to transform himself into a Westerner and swaggered into the hotel. No one would have thought that he had such a trick up his sleeve. He was right under the noses of the Japanese. He was truly a black sheep under the lamp. Ha! Even if I hand it over to them, they wouldn't dare to accept it. This is a hot potato. If the National Security Bureau were to accept it, it would be an act of the country. It would lead to international disputes and war. Tang Zheng laughed loudly. Only then did Wu relax. The emperor was related to the safety of her master and the others. Even if it was a country, she would not easily give it up. Tang Zheng took out a satellite phone from his summer bag and dialed Su Ingtian's number. After a few rings, Su Ingtian's familiar voice rang out. "Who is it?" "Me." Tang Zheng said a simple word. Su Ingtian immediately recognized his voice and said in surprise, "Ha, so it's you, brat. You slipped away again. Didn't I ask you to take care of Princess? And I told you to protect her safety. So why did you run away without saying a word? You didn't even say a word. Could it be that Princess, and is really that terrifying that you want to avoid her?" Speaking of this mission, Su Ingtian was really depressed. Other people would fight to the death for this mission, but this brat wanted to hide far away. It was too abnormal. This made him, an old man in his 40s, unable to figure out what Tang Zheng was thinking. How much danger can she be in the country? Moreover, with your secret protection, nothing will happen. Tang Zheng explained. Su Ingtian chuckled and said, "Speaking of chaos, the island nation has been really exciting recently. You know that there's a big mess, right? Island nation has done so many bad things to me. Hua xia. A while ago, they even sent people to assassinate Princess and frame our country. I don't know which fierce person it is, but if I meet him, I will definitely treat him to a few drinks and properly thank him." He didn't expect Su Ingtian to take the initiative to change the topic. Tang Zheng said, embarrassedly, "I came to find you today for this matter." "For this matter? Wait a minute. Tang Zheng, where are you now?" Su Ingtian reacted, as if he had realized something, and asked nervously, "I'm in the island nation. F***CK. Su Ingtian couldn't help but curse. His breathing also couldn't help but quicken as he asked, "Don't tell me that fierce person is you?" Tang Zheng said embarrassedly, "You guessed right." Silence. Su Ingtian was completely silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from the phone. Su Ingtian knew that Tang Zheng's courage was big and his ability was not small, but he never would have thought that he would dare to single-handedly break into a country, destroy the imperial palace that had been passed down for thousands of years, and even kidnap the ruler of a country. There wasn't such a fierce person in the movies. Before Su Yingtian could react, Tang Zheng dryly coughed and reminded him, "You are the director of the National Security Bureau. What kind of battle have you not seen? Why do you look like you haven't seen the world?" F***CK. Su Yingtian cursed again and said angrily, "Do you think that the director of the National Security Bureau is omnipotent? As far as I know, there is an upper limit to the strength of the people I know, but you seem to have no upper limit. Every time you dare to do something shocking. Do you think that everyone's hearts are too strong? So you're deliberately testing everyone?" Su Yingtian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He really was someone who had seen great battles, but he couldn't withstand Tang Zheng's frightening torment. Su Yingtian took a few deep breaths, suppressed the shock in his heart, and asked curiously, "How did the island nation provoke you this time? Why are you so fierce?" "This is a secret for now, but I can tell you one more thing. The sinking of the warship a while ago was also caused by me." Tang Zheng simply told him everything at once. Hiss! Su Yingtian's gasp could be heard from the phone. "My heart can't take it. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You really want to scare me to death." Su Yingtian patted his chest and said with lingering fear, "Do you know how serious the warship incident was a while ago? The island nation was certain that our Huaxia was the one who did it. After all, the two countries are old enemies. Because of this, the two countries went to war. I didn't think that they wouldn't blame us. This was really done by our people. If the other side knew that you were from the National Security Bureau, then I'm afraid it would really cause a war between the two countries." Su Yingtian rubbed his eyebrows. In the past, he was very lucky to have recruited Tang Zheng, but now it seemed that this might not be a lucky thing. He was simply a ticking time bomb. He didn't know when it would explode, but it would implicate the National Security Bureau and even the entire country. Of course, this was only the worst-case scenario. Su Yingtian and Tang Zheng's relationship was already unusual, so he wouldn't burn the bridge after crossing it. Su Yingtian really had a headache. After a while, he said, "Is the emperor still in your hands?" "Of course, he's next door. Just now, he tried his best to escape, but we stopped him." Chapter 670. Su Yingtian could not think of anyone who would be as daring as Tang Zheng. Such a daring person was rarely seen in the world, treating all power and prestige as child's play. "Marshal!" Tang Zheng replied. Su Yingtian was slightly startled. A tall figure and a cold and beautiful face immediately appeared in his mind. So it's her. Although it was unexpected, everything was within his expectations. In this world, only Marshall would accompany Tang Zheng in his unbridled madness. "All right, then let's talk about the reason for your call." Su Yingtian took a deep breath and asked, "What do you know about the island nation's imperial tutor?" Tang Zheng asked directly, "Island nation's imperial tutor?" Su Yingtian's voice slightly changed. "Why did you think of asking him?" Tang Zheng heard this, and his heart moved. Since Su Yingtian said this, it meant that he definitely knew something. So he said, "I am looking for him to ask about an important matter." "What is it?" Su Yingtian said. Since it was related to Marshall Monarch Mountain, Tang Zheng did not want to make it public, so he said, "It's not convenient to say the specific reason, but this time I want to ask you for a favor." At this point, Su Yingtian cleverly chose not to ask any more questions and directly said, "The imperial tutor is a special existence in the island nation, and this name has been passed down for a long time. It does not belong to any one person, but belongs to the imperial tutor manor. Every generation of the imperial tutor manor's master will inherit the title of imperial tutor. Of course, the imperial tutor is too mysterious. Most people, and even many martial artists, do not know of his existence. The imperial tutor manor and the imperial family complement each other. Many times, the imperial family has to humbly ask for advice or help from the imperial tutor manor. The imperial tutor manor does not take orders from the imperial family, so the two are on equal footing. Tang Zhang was surprised. Su Yingtian actually knew so much about the imperial tutor, especially the existence of the imperial tutor's residence. Tang Zhang was very surprised. Island Nation actually had such a mysterious organization, just like the Azure Dragon Palace in Huaxia. Of course, there was a difference between the imperial advisor's residence and the Azure Dragon Palace. This was because there was no news of the Azure Dragon Palace influencing the political situation of the country. However, the imperial advisor's residence had such a strong influence on the royal family. Perhaps this was the result of the difference between the two countries' national conditions. Now that you've captured the Heavenly Emperor, the imperial advisor's residence will definitely not sit idly by. Su Yingtian added. Tang Zheng frowned and said, "That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to find the imperial advisor's residence, but they didn't respond at all." Now that the island nation is in such a big mess, the imperial advisor's residence didn't even let out a fart. The imperial advisor's residence is a hidden line, so of course they won't surface so easily. I dare to conclude that they are definitely looking for you everywhere. Su Yingtian retorted. Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "Then wouldn't I have to purposely leak my whereabouts? Speaking of which, I really admire you. I really don't know how you escaped the other party's inescapable net." Su Yingtian sighed. This kind of skill was simply heaven-defying. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he never thought that Tang Zheng would use illusion techniques to change his appearance and deceive the world. If you want the imperial advisor's residence to find you, then you must be fully prepared beforehand, because what awaits you will definitely be a fatal attack like a storm. Su Yingtian warned. Understood. Tang Zheng understood clearly. Let me ask again, what is the imperial advisor's realm? Of course, he is in the master realm. As for the level of the master realm, there is no accurate information on this. But one thing is certain, the imperial advisors of the past generations are the number one masters of the island nation. Su Yingtian said in a deep voice. Tang Zheng's head slightly sank, and he felt that this matter was getting more and more troublesome. However, even if it was troublesome, he still had to deal with it. He couldn't give up halfway. You don't want to say what is the reason for such a big mess, but I still want to tell you, take care of yourself. Where there is life, there is hope. Everything must be done with the premise of protecting your life. You have great potential for development, so you can't let anything happen to you in a foreign country. Su Yingtian advised earnestly. Although Tang Zheng had caused such a big disturbance, he still cared about him from the bottom of his heart. Thank you. Tang Zheng could feel his sincerity. If my special identity brings any adverse effects to you or the country, you have to bear with it. Tang Zheng knew very well that his identity was too special. He was a Huaxia person and also a member of the National Security Bureau, which meant that he had an official background. In the island nation, he had attacked the warship, kidnapped the emperor, and destroyed the imperial palace. No matter what it was shocking enough to make the island nation gnash their teeth. If the island nation investigated Huaxia's officials, Huaxia would indeed be in a passive situation. Su Yingtian understood and said, "Don't worry, I am destined to deal with this kind of situation." Moreover, Huaxia is no longer the weak Huaxia of decades ago. Today, whoever wants to use force against Huaxia will have to think twice before doing so. Hearing this, Tang Zheng was slightly relieved. Suddenly, he remembered something and said, Li Palace's holy maiden Li Shaotian said that the island nation's emperor has a very serious hidden illness. This news is most likely true. Although I have caught the emperor, I have not found out what illness he has. His body is very healthy, even healthier than the average person. It is very strange. Su Ingtian obviously did not know about this news. Hearing this, he was stunned for a moment and said, "You are saying that the island nation's emperor has a hidden illness? I have never heard of this matter. Since you say it is true, I will immediately send people to investigate. If this information is handled properly, it will definitely be of great use." Su Ingtian was pleasantly surprised and continued, "But what does this have to do with Li Xiaotian? Li Xiaotian has come to the island nation. Moreover, there is something fishy between the Li Palace and the island nation's imperial family. You must be careful." Tang Zheng also did not understand the relationship between the Li Palace and the island nation's imperial family. But for Li Xiaotian to appear here at this time, it was definitely not normal. Su Ingtian's voice also became low as he said in a serious tone, "Thank you for this news. The three large organizations have always been the main targets of the government. If they are really colluding with the island nation's imperial family to harm the country and its people, we will definitely not sit by and do nothing. This country cannot allow a few organizations to stir up trouble. Also, if you have any further information about the emperor's hidden illness, please immediately inform me." "No problem." Tang Zheng hung up the phone and walked in front of the emperor. The emperor's eyes were wide open as he stared straight at Tang Zheng. "It's useless for you to stare at me like this. I've always wanted to use you as bait to fish out the imperial tutor, but I didn't expect that we would hide too well, so he couldn't find us. Since that's the case, I'll take the initiative to appear and use you to fish out the big fish," Tang Zheng said to the emperor. The emperor said hatefully, "If you dare to have any ideas about the imperial tutor, you will definitely die." "Hee, is that so? Then we'll wait and see." Tang Zheng smiled mysteriously and left the room. Wu chased after him and asked in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" "You guys continue to stay in the hotel. I'll take a look around the imperial palace and send them a message. The imperial tutor's mansion will definitely hear the news and move." Tang Zheng's eyes flashed with a bright light as he said mysteriously. Wu's heart skipped a beat. He had already guessed his method and warned, "Be careful, I'll wait for you to come back." Without a doubt, Tang Zheng going to the imperial palace was a very dangerous action, especially his method. When he arrived outside the imperial palace and saw the combination of light and darkness, he understood that his decision was indeed very risky. However, he had to give it a try even if it was risky. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome for the enemy to not be able to find him. Looking at the messy Kokyo from afar, the corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curled up into a smile as he muttered to himself, "Back then, I wanted to burn it. My dream has come true. This scene is truly beautiful." After saying that, he swaggered towards the ruins of the imperial palace. When he walked out of the shadow of the street corner, his face had already undergone a tremendous change. He no longer had the face of a Westerner, but had instead returned to his original appearance. When he walked across the street and arrived in front of the ruins of the imperial palace, the people who were cleaning up the ruins did not notice him. However, Tang Zheng already felt that he was being stared at by countless pairs of eyes in an instant. This was like a pack of wolves staring at their prey, and a sense of danger arose spontaneously. He walked in a circle in front of the ruins as if nothing had happened. Then he turned a corner and walked toward another street. He immediately felt that someone was following him. He did not turn around and calmly strolled down the street. On the bustling street, pedestrians came and went, shuttling back and forth endlessly. Unknowingly, the number of pedestrians on both sides of the street gradually decreased. It turned out that many people had appeared out of nowhere and separated the pedestrians to the side. The area around Tang Zheng became a vacuum. The number of pedestrians on the street also decreased as they were being cleared away. Tang Zheng saw all of this, but he did not care at all and continued to do his own thing. Suddenly, a group of people walked towards Tang Zheng in a fan-shaped formation. Their expressions were solemn, and there were even sparks of hatred flickering in their eyes. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and whispered, "Are you finally going to make a move?" The two sides approached each other. Tang Zheng was surrounded, and enemies were eyeing him covetously from all directions. Tang Zheng stopped, crossed his arms, and said, "Who are the people from the Imperial Advisor's residence?" He believed that the people from the Imperial Advisor's residence must be mixed in with these people. The crowd was silent, and many of them even revealed looks of doubt. It was obvious that to them, the three words Imperial Advisor's residence were also very unfamiliar. Bring a message to the Imperial Advisor. If you want the Sky Emperor to live, then tell me the information I want. As for what information, he should be very clear about it. Otherwise, the situation will continue to worsen. Tang Zheng said indifferently. Still, no one answered. The atmosphere was oppressive and austere. "All right, I'm done. I'm leaving." Chapter 671. Tang Zheng rushed out of the encirclement and left the crowd far behind. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the street, leaving behind a group of island nation people staring at each other helplessly. Tang Zheng had already changed his appearance and blended into the crowd. He walked towards the hotel without leaving a trace. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and abruptly turned his head to look behind him. The crowd that was moving like shuttles were all unfamiliar faces, and there was nothing unusual about them. He frowned and muttered in his heart, "Why do I feel like someone is following me?" With his strength, he was still being silently followed by someone. That person's strength must be very terrifying. Just now, there was no one with a particularly high cultivation in that group. It was easy for me to get rid of them. Why do I feel like I'm being followed? It was precisely because he saw that although the enemy had a lot of people, their individual cultivation was not high. That was why he showed himself without any fear. He had never thought that his flawless plan would also have a mishap. Although he did not see the person following him, he believed in his intuition. He was definitely being followed. Since that was the case, he could not continue to go to the hotel. He quietly turned into another street. The feeling of being followed had not disappeared. 5. Because, Humph, I want to see who you are. Could it be the state preceptor? He immediately rejected this idea. If the other party was really the state preceptor, he would have already made his move. Why would he need to sneakily follow him? The pedestrians on both sides of the street gradually decreased. The streets became more and more remote. The buildings became lower and lower. The fox has finally revealed his tail. Tang Zheng's eyes flashed. Although he did not turn around, he could clearly feel that someone was following him. If not for his superior perception, he would definitely not feel the existence of this person. The other party was like air. Finally, Tang Zheng stopped and slowly turned around. The other party did not hide, because this was a very spacious place. There was nowhere to hide. This person looked at Tang Zheng calmly. Their eyes met. No one moved. They just looked at each other quietly. Tang Zheng's eyes flashed with surprise. This was another woman, a beautiful woman. Moreover, the expression between her brows was extremely cold. "Are you from the Imperial Advisor's residence?" Tang Zheng broke the silence and asked. "Tang Zheng, you also know ninjutsu." The other party didn't answer the question, but said indifferently. Tang Zheng curled his lips in disdain and said, "Ninjutsu?" As soon as he finished speaking, his face changed and returned to his original appearance. "Ninjutsu is just a small trick. Let me tell you, this is Hua Xia's genjutsu, the ancestor of your ninjutsu. Her face turned ashen as she said, How dare you? Are all Hua Xia people so arrogant? Tang Zheng was so angry that he laughed. You still have the nerve to say that we're arrogant and conceited? I think you're the frogs at the bottom of the well. You think you're the best in the world after learning a little bit of magic? The ignorant are fearless. If it was an ordinary person, they would certainly be in awe of the magic of ninjutsu. But Tang Zheng was a cultivator and had seen too many powerful magic. He knew that Hua Xia's magic was extensive and profound. Island Nation's ninjutsu was not even worthy to carry the shoes of Hua Xia's magic. Island Nation people were wishful thinking that ninjutsu was amazing and treated it as a treasure. In Tang Zheng's eyes, it was ridiculous. You dare to insult ninjutsu. I promise you, you will see what real ninjutsu is, and in the end, you will die on this land. Is that so? Then I'll wait and see. Tang Zheng shrugged and said disapprovingly. Immediately, the other party was driven mad with anger. Since you're from the Imperial Advisor's residence, then you're not a nobody. Tell me your name. Otherwise, if you lose your life, you won't have this opportunity. The other party said, Of course, I'm not like you who hides the head and shows the tail. Remember, my name is Junko. Tang Zheng faintly smiled and said, Your name is quite good. As the saying goes, beautiful women are destined to have a short life. As his voice fell, Tang Zheng walked towards Junko. Just a small step, and he was already in front of Junko. Junko had seen this magical distance shrinking technique before, so she had been waiting for it, and was secretly on guard. When Tang Zheng raised his leg, she reacted. Her hands quickly formed a seal. Whoosh! The air shook, and she unexpectedly disappeared in front of Tang Zheng. Huh! Tang Zheng could not help but exclaim. Although this Junko was young, she was not a fake. Her ninjutsu had actually reached such a level. However, this was not the first time that Tang Zheng had seen this kind of ninjutsu. The emperor's younger brother also used this kind of ninjutsu and was finally defeated by Tang Zheng. Junko's cultivation was even weaker than the emperor's younger brother. In front of Tang Zheng, it was like Guan Yu playing with a knife. He did not even use war spirit. Instead, he used a pair of thin hands to cut the void in front of him. Whoosh! A strong wind blew, and the air shook. Junko's figure appeared again. Tang Zheng's hand had already reached her chest. She hurriedly blocked with both hands. Bang! Both of her hands were struck by Tang Zheng's hand, causing her to fall back and fiercely hit her chest. Even her chest was flattened. Puff! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her eyes flashed with shock and pain. With a muffled groan, she quickly retreated. Tang Zheng stood with his hands behind his back. He did not continue to pursue. Instead, he calmly said, You are not my opponent. If you continue to fight with me, you will die without a doubt. Humph! Even if you kill me, you can forget about making me surrender. Junko angrily stared at him and said with a sonorous voice, Killing you is too easy. Since you have chased me, then I will let you pass a message to the Imperial Advisor's residence. Tell me the details of the warship bombarding the island. Perhaps the Emperor will have a chance to live. Otherwise, I don't mind letting the people of the island nation watch their emperor disappear from this world. Junko's expression changed. You are so unbridled. There will definitely be no good result. You will die miserably. You don't have to worry about this. Pass my message. I want to know the answer tomorrow. At that time, you will come here alone with the answer. If you dare to play any tricks, humph, the consequences will be very serious. With that said, Tang Zheng flashed backwards and disappeared from Junko's line of sight at lightning speed. Junko wanted to chase after him, but stopped in her tracks. She knew that she was not his opponent. Previously, when she heard Li Xiaotian talking about this person's strength, she didn't believe it. But after seeing it with her own eyes, she understood the gap between them. She was known as the #1 genius of the island nation. Her master, the imperial advisor, once asserted that her achievements in the future would even surpass him. So, from childhood to adulthood, she wore the halo of a genius. Gradually, she adapted to everyone's eyes and the treatment of a genius. But now, she was defeated without any preparation. The halo of a genius instantly dimmed, and one could imagine her mood. She stood on the street and looked at the direction where Tang Zheng disappeared in silence for a long time. After an unknown period of time, she leisurely turned around and strode away. There were green hills and clear waters. Next to a gurgling stream, there were houses in groups of 3 to 5. It looked like a small village. It was quiet and strange, giving a feeling of a paradise. Especially this place was located near Tokyo, which made it even more precious. But strangely, no stranger discovered this paradise. The people walking around nodded and greeted each other. Apparently, they were very familiar with this place. As soon as Junko stepped into this place, someone immediately stopped and respectfully saluted her. Junko returned the salute for the first time, which made everyone curious. In the past, when someone saluted her, she would proudly leave without showing any kindness. There must be a demon behind this. Everyone looked at Junko with suspicion. This genius of the imperial advisor's residence. Yes, this was the legendary and mysterious imperial advisor's residence. No one would have thought that the famous imperial advisor's residence would be an ancient village. It didn't have the majesty of an imperial advisor's residence. But the people walking around showed that this place was different. Everyone's footsteps were very brisk, like a gust of wind. Their movements were elegant, exuding a different kind of charm. Junko walked into the depths of the village. A moment later, she arrived in front of a wooden house. This wooden house was even smaller than the other houses. It was particularly inconspicuous, especially the holes in the wall, which made the wooden house look a bit dilapidated. When Junko approached the wooden door, she respectfully stopped. The various expressions on her face completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a tranquility. Imperial advisor. Junko softly called in island nation language. The wooden door didn't respond, as if there was no one inside. After a long while, an old voice came from the wooden house. Junko, you are impetuous. Go to the sword forest and meditate for half a day. Junko didn't have the slightest dissatisfaction. She deeply bowed and said, yes. She turned and left the wooden house. The wooden house was the same as before. It didn't have the slightest domineering aura, but it made people deeply feel the difference. Junko strolled to the deepest part of the village. It was a bamboo forest, which was an extremely important place in the imperial advisor's residence. The sword forest was the place where the disciples of the imperial advisor's residence practiced their swordsmanship. But not everyone could come here to practice their swordsmanship. Ordinary disciples could only practice their swordsmanship mechanically by the stream over and over again. Only those who had reached the great Tao of swordsmanship were qualified to come here to practice their swordsmanship and comprehend the essence of swordsmanship. It was said that all the imperial advisors had comprehended the great Tao of swordsmanship in the sword forest. There were too many magical places in this bamboo forest. What one could obtain was entirely dependent on one's luck. It wasn't Junko's first time in the sword forest. The moment she stepped into the sword forest, although the scenery in all directions didn't change at all, her entire person had changed. Looking up, These green bamboos were no longer green bamboos. Instead, they had turned into long swords. The long swords stood in great numbers, giving people a sense of awe-inspiring mystery. This was an independent behavior of the sword forest, and even the imperial preceptor couldn't change it. From this point, one could also see the magic of the forest. Junko's hands trembled as she reached out and grabbed the hilt. She subconsciously closed her eyes, as if she was carefully perceiving the sword. Clang! The long sword was lifted up high by Junko. The setting sun sprinkled down from the sky, and the mottled light reflected off the sword, rippling with a mysterious and powerful aura. Junko sighed in her heart. She had been cultivating for so long and had been looking forward to this day, but she hadn't had a breakthrough. She didn't expect to gain so much after fighting with Tang Zheng this time. She couldn't help but think of that delicate face. With a complicated expression, she sighed, "Should I thank him?" Humph. In the next second, she rejected this ridiculous idea. This was her own contribution over a long period of time. What did it have to do with that person? Since her cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds, and the sword forest had given her a sword, the next time she met Tang Zheng, the outcome would be uncertain. She was full of confidence and excitement. She took a deep look at the sword forest and strode out of the forest. While strolling in the village, pairs of surprised eyes were fixed on the long sword in her hand. Many people reacted, and their eyes were filled with envy. Junko walked in front of the crowd with a calm expression. Suddenly, a person walked in front of her and blocked her way. Li Xiaotian looked at Junko with a complicated expression and said, "Is the sword forest really so magical? Your cultivation has improved greatly after going in." Junko looked at her indifferently and didn't say a word. "I really want to go to your sword forest and experience it once," Li Xiaotian said enviously. Junko's expression turned cold, and she warned, "The sword forest is an important place in the imperial preceptor's residence. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter, let alone an outsider like you. If you dare to have any ideas about the sword forest, I advise you to give up." Junko was very curious about Li Xiaotian. Back then, the imperial preceptor asked her to bring Li Xiaotian back. The two of them talked for a long time behind closed doors, and even Junko didn't know what they talked about. This added a mysterious aura to Li Xiaotian's body. In the past few days, Li Xiaotian had been staying in the village like a transcendent existence. It was unknown why she continued to stay here. Junko instinctively resisted Li Xiaotian. Perhaps it was because they were both women, especially beautiful women, and they didn't get along well with each other. However, due to the imperial preceptor's orders, she didn't dare to do anything to Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian didn't care about Junko's warning. Instead, she looked at the sword forest from afar, and her eyes kept changing. No one knew what she was thinking. Chapter 673. State teacher's words of congratulations made Junko ecstatic. She quickly bowed and said, "Everything is thanks to State teacher." State teacher shook his head and said, "This is the result of your hard work and luck. This sword is like autumn water. Why don't you call it autumn water sword?" Junko excitedly said, "Thank you, State teacher, for the name." She subconsciously stroked the sword. "From now on, this sword will be called autumn water." State teacher nodded with gratification. Then he turned to Li Xiaotian and asked, "Miss Xiaotian, why are you looking for me?" State teacher, "I heard from Junko that she found Tang Zheng's whereabouts. So I came to inquire." Li Xiaotian said. The imperial tutor looked at Junko without batting an eyelid. Junko understood and said, "Reporting to the imperial tutor, Tang Zheng took the initiative to appear outside the imperial residence. We couldn't capture him. He is a cultivator. His cultivation is high. How could he be captured alive so easily? The imperial tutor said dismissively. Since he has appeared, there must be something else. State teacher has a divine foresight. He asked me to pass a few words to you. Junko said while looking at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian was unmoved. He didn't have any intention to avoid suspicion. Instead, he waited for her to speak with interest. Seeing that the state preceptor had no objection, Junko suppressed the displeasure in her heart and truthfully repeated Tang Zheng's words. State teacher heard this, but didn't get angry. Instead, he looked at Li Xiaotian and said, "This person really hasn't given up. He wants to know the answer to the island." "Actually, I also want to know the answer," Li Xiaotian said with a smile. State teacher chuckled and said, "The inside story of this matter is too complicated. It's better to know less." Li Xiaotian was unmoved and calmly said, "I am a very curious person. I want to know more." Is that so?" State teacher gave a meaningful laugh. Suddenly, his tone changed as he said, "I can tell you the truth. The people on that island have all been imprisoned." Imprisoned? Li Xiaotian's expression changed greatly. Since Wu Junshan and the others were living on the island, they must be extremely powerful, even terrifying. Who in this world could imprison them? Li Xiaotian felt that all of this was inconceivable. If it was someone else who said this, she would definitely think that it was a fantasy story and that the other party was lying to her. However, since it came from the Grand Tutor's mouth, there was no doubt about it. Yes, those people are a huge threat, not only to the island nation, but also to the martial artists of Huaxia. So someone told me this news, and then I thought of a way to imprison them. The imperial advisor said lightly. Li Xiaotian's face stiffened. He seemed to have thought of a possibility and asked tentatively, "Who told you this news?" "Then who told you to come to the island nation?" State teacher didn't answer and asked back. Li Xiaotian was startled and blurted out, "Palace master." State teacher chuckled and didn't say anything else. Li Xiaotian was shocked. She didn't expect that all of this was controlled by the palace master, especially the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the others. Even she didn't know about it, but the palace master knew about it and even hid it from her. This feeling of not being trusted made her very uncomfortable. Of course, she didn't doubt the authenticity of state teacher's words because the palace master didn't give her any specific orders. He only said that when the time was right, she would naturally know everything. Now that the time was right, she actually learned this news from an outsider. A feeling of being deceived arose spontaneously. Junko looked at state teacher and Li Xiaotian with mixed feelings. She didn't know the information conveyed by these words. She didn't know what state teacher was hiding from her. Of course, she didn't have the slightest anger or resentment because state teacher's image in her mind was too high and couldn't be questioned. Since he didn't say it, there must be a reason. She only needed to silently watch. Why did the palace master tell you this news? After pondering for a long time, Li Xiaotian asked, "Maybe she thinks her strength is not enough to deal with those people." "Nonsense!" Li Xiaotian shouted. His anger gradually replaced his reverence for the imperial preceptor. Junko heard this and flew into a rage. She stood in front of Li Xiaotian and glared at him. "Don't be rude to state teacher." Li Xiaotian snorted and was about to fly into a rage when state teacher said, "Junko, don't worry. Miss Li, your palace master is farsighted. She told me this news. Of course, there must be a deep meaning. As for what I said just now, only I have the strength to deal with those people. It's not an arrogant statement, because the facts are the best proof." Li Xiaotian took a few deep breaths. There were more and more questions in his mind, as if they were about to rush out from the top of his head. Why did the palace master do all this? Why did she ask others to do it? Was it really like State Teacher said? Only he had the strength to deal with Wu Junshan, and the others quietly, but she really couldn't see how State Teacher was more powerful than Wu Junshan or the Palace Master. State Teacher must be a Grandmaster. As for the level of Grandmaster, Li Xiaotian certainly couldn't see, but he couldn't be so powerful that he could easily imprison Wu Junshan and the others. In short, all of this was too strange. Then where did you imprison those people? Li Xiaotian asked unwillingly. State Teacher smiled mysteriously and said, "You don't need to worry about that. But Tang Zheng has given an ultimatum. If you don't tell him what happened on the island, or even let those people go, the emperor will die. This kind of loss is difficult to make up for your country." State Teacher laughed out loud. "He wants to threaten me. I'm really curious how far he can go in the end." As he said this, State Teacher silently thought in his heart, Tang Zheng is a cultivator. Just this identity alone is enough for me to capture him. He has hidden secrets that need to be unearthed. You don't want to care about the life and death of the emperor anymore? Hearing State Teacher's answer, Li Xiaotian's heart was filled with doubts and asked. State Teacher laughed mysteriously, but didn't answer this question. Seeing that he couldn't get any useful information, Li Xiaotian could only helplessly say, "If there is any news, please let me know." With that, he turned around and walked out of the small wooden house. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, her heart was in a mess. Why did the Palace Master do all this? Why did he ask her to come to the island nation at this time? Was it really to treat the emperor's illness? There were too many doubts and mysteries in this. She walked in the darkness with 1 foot and 1 foot, her head in a mess. Unknowingly, she actually came to the side of the sword forest. She stopped in her tracks and raised her head to look at the dark and deep sword forest. It was as if many towering swords were erected in front of her, and a murderous aura rushed towards her. Is the sword forest really as powerful as the legends say? She had heard too many legends about the sword forest in the past few days. Although she didn't practice swordsmanship, she knew a little about it. Many of the State Teacher's residence's predecessors had comprehended swordsmanship from the sword forest. This definitely showed that the sword forest was not just powerful and mysterious. The State Teacher's residence is full of mysteries, and it's not a good idea for me to stay here aimlessly. Why don't I explore the sword forest and see if I can find anything? She immediately did as she thought, and her eyes immediately became determined. Although the State Teacher's residence had repeatedly ordered that outsiders were not allowed to enter the sword forest, the prideful her didn't take this order to heart. Moreover, her curiosity towards the State Teacher's residence had increased greatly. It was necessary for her to find out something. When she first met the State Teacher, the two of them had a long private conversation. Outsiders didn't know the content of their conversation, but in fact, there weren't many secrets that couldn't be revealed. However, there was one thing that Li Xiaotian could confirm from the conversation with the State Teacher, that the Palace Master and the State Teacher were old acquaintances. Their friendship seemed to be quite deep, although Li Xiaotian was still a little brooding about this matter. He didn't show it. In fact, Li Xiaotian looked down on people from the island nation. This time, he was acting under orders, so he was so close to people from the island nation. However, she really didn't understand why Palace Master White, who had a high status and amazing strength, wanted to mix with the State Teacher of the island nation. Humph, since you don't want to tell me the answer directly, I'll find it myself. I'll start with the sword forest and dig out the secrets of the State Teacher's residence. Li Xiaotian was determined and strode into the sword forest. The sword forest was pitch black, but there wasn't a trace of mosquitoes or frogs. It was eerily silent. Li Xiaotian walked in with a calm expression and began to wander in the sword forest. The bright moonlight sprinkled down. There was a faint light in the sword forest, so it wasn't dark. The sword forest wasn't big. Li Xiaotian wandered around for more than 10 minutes, but he didn't find any clues. The sword forest was no different from an ordinary bamboo forest, but why did it become an important place of the state teacher's residence? The state teacher's residence had been passed down for so many years. How could they treat a useless bamboo forest as a treasure? This meant that the sword forest was definitely not as simple as it looked. She wandered around 2 more times unwillingly, but still found nothing. She was almost in despair. Maybe it's thanks to the state teacher's disciple that I had the opportunity to comprehend the swordsmanship. She shook her head helplessly and walked out of the sword forest dejectedly. After walking for a while, she found that there were still towering bamboos in all directions. The path she came from had disappeared. She didn't panic. Instead, she looked around with interest. There were identical bamboos all around her. There was no sense of direction or specific road signs. I'm lost, but I didn't realize how big the sword forest was. How could I be lost? She muttered unwillingly. She was never one to admit defeat easily. Since she was lost, she would find another way. If these bamboos were in her way, she didn't mind chopping down the bamboos to clear a path. There's something strange about the sword forest. She stopped in her tracks. She knew that running around like a headless fly would definitely cause problems. She looked into the distance, and all she could see were tall green bamboos. Chapter 674. Li Xiaotian was good at using bows and arrows, which was also why she had always coveted the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. At this moment, the arrow in her hand was not a shooting sun arrow. She only had one shooting sun arrow, and unless she had no other choice, she would definitely not use this divine armament. Wang, with a release of his finger, the arrow flew out. The surging airflow stirred up the air in all directions, causing the bamboo leaves to rustle nonstop. Ding! With a crisp sound, the arrow hit a green bamboo. However, a strange scene happened. The green bamboo was undamaged. It was only bent in a large arc by the force of the bow and arrow. Then it quickly bounced back, still piercing through the sky. Li Xiaotian's pupils constricted as he looked at this scene in disbelief. This was just a green bamboo. How could it block such a powerful arrow attack? There must be a demon when things are abnormal. She felt more and more that this sword forest was strange. Not only did it block her path and confuse her direction, even this kind of attack was unable to harm the green bamboo in the slightest. She gradually began to believe the legends about the sword forest. There really was some kind of mysterious power that could not be explained clearly. A small country like this actually has such a magical place. It's strange. Li Xiaotian shook her head. She was very puzzled. So what if it's magical? I don't believe that a living person like me will be trapped in this bamboo forest to death. Li Xiaotian's prideful nature erupted. How could she admit defeat to the bamboo forest? Wouldn't that make people laugh their heads off? Thus, she took a deep breath and pulled the bowstring again. Waves of inner strength passed through her arm and into the bowstring. The bowstring was pulled into a full moon, and the arrowhead shone with a cold light under the moonlight. Swoosh! The arrow left the line, and the air seemed to be torn apart, producing a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Boom! A green bamboo was hit once again, and the berserk force directly pressed it to the ground. I think you're still going on like this. Li Xiaotian's eyes revealed a trace of complacency. However, in the next second, her face froze. Her eyes were wide open as she stared straight at the green bamboo. The bamboo that had fallen to the ground just now bounced back, as if nothing had happened. It was still proud and straight. Li Xiaotian was dumbfounded. He had never seen or heard of such a situation before. Was this still an ordinary green bamboo? She quickly stroked the bamboo pole beside her, but there was nothing strange. Wasn't this just ordinary bamboo? But since when did bamboo have such a strong ability to withstand attacks? What the devil? What the devil? She couldn't help but exclaim. She looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. As long as I learn these techniques, I will be able to perfect my ninjutsu and bring it to a new peak. Completely surpassing Hua Xia's techniques will be just around the corner. At that time, the empire will rise again in the forest of the world. Hua Xia and other countries will crawl under our feet, allowing the empire to complete the unfinished business of our ancestors. His words gradually revealed a sense of madness. It made people tremble in fear. Li Xiaotian had already used all of her skills, but she still couldn't break out of this forest of swords. Her martial arts were like scratching an itch, unable to hurt the slightest bit of the forest of swords. Could it be that they really want to force me to use the shooting sun arrows? She touched the shooting sun arrows that she always carried on her back. The shooting sun arrows were divine weapons. They couldn't be easily shown to others, so as to avoid attracting the disaster of killing monks. But now that she was trapped in this damned forest, she was so angry that she was ready to use the shooting sun arrows. She didn't believe that these cabinets could withstand the power of the shooting sun arrows. It must be known that the shooting sun arrows were used to shoot down the sun. Just as she was about to make up her mind, a person's figure became clear under the moonlight. It gradually approached and finally arrived in front of Li Xiaotian. Junko looked at Li Xiaotian with an unkind expression and said coldly, "You trespassed into the forest of swords. That is a capital offense." Li Xiaotian was unmoved and said indifferently, "Then are you here to kill me?" "Humph, the state teacher is merciful and has given you a way out. If you dare to run amok again, then I guarantee you will regret it." Junko's killing intent soared. With her temper, she really wanted to kill Li Xiaotian on the spot. But she didn't dare to disobey the state teacher's orders. Li Xiaotian shrugged and smiled indifferently. She strode in the direction Junko came from and left the forest of swords in a short while. Junko followed behind her step by step, monitoring her and preventing her from causing any trouble. Li Xiaotian quietly returned to her room. Junko stood outside for a long time before turning around and leaving. Li Xiaotian lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling with her eyes wide open. Hundreds of thoughts ran through her mind. The state teacher's residence is more mysterious than I expected, especially in the forest of swords. The strangeness and mystery is far beyond my imagination. I must get to the bottom of it. These years, although the island nation and Hua Xia coexisted peacefully, a dog can't stop itself from eating shit. This is a truth that has been proven for thousands of years. If the island nation continues to grow stronger, they will definitely rise again and stir up more storms. Li Xiaotian's understanding was clear and deep. She didn't really treat the state teacher's residence as a little sheep just because of their temporary close relationship. The island nation was like a poisonous snake, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. As long as the other party was given the chance, they would take a fatal bite. After returning to the Li Palace this time, I must ask the palace master about this matter. The cooperation between the Li Palace and the state teacher's residence puzzled Li Xiaotian and even made her somewhat dissatisfied. Her thoughts were more flexible than Junko's. Although the palace master didn't tell her the truth, she still wanted to know the ins and outs of the matter. The next day, Junko left the state teacher's residence alone, but she didn't notice that Li Xiaotian was following her from a distance. Li Xiaotian was good at hiding her tracks, so she followed from a distance to find out where Junko was going. Based on her intuition, she was sure that Junko was going on some secret operation. She had been in the state teacher's residence for a few days, but she had been doing nothing and making no progress. This made her very frightened and dissatisfied. Back then, the palace master only told her to act according to the circumstances and didn't give her any specific arrangements. Her operation this time was more like an experience. Li Xiaotian wasn't someone who spent her days muddling along. Since she was here, she naturally had to get to the bottom of everything. Junko was as fast as a shooting star. It didn't take long for her to arrive at the place where she and Tang Zheng had agreed to meet yesterday. Looking up, there was no one around. Did he go back on his words? Junko frowned. Why would I go back on my words? A voice suddenly rang in Junko's ears. She was startled and subconsciously jumped to the side, staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. She didn't know how he could appear and disappear so mysteriously. Did you bring the information I asked for? Tang Zheng asked. Junko's expression was stern. I have to see the emperor first before I can tell you the information. He, are you afraid that I'll lie to you? One must always be on guard against others. These are the rules of the game that I set. You have no right to bargain. Tang Zheng slightly frowned and said with dissatisfaction. Then there's nothing to talk about. Junko's attitude was very firm. If I can't see the emperor, then there's nothing to talk about. You're not afraid that I'll kill him. Tang Zheng said fiercely. Don't scare me. If you kill him, then you won't know anything about those people. Junko joked. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. If that was the case, then she really did know about Wu Junshan and the others. Compared to the Mikado, he cared more about the safety of these people. Obviously, Junko was also very clear about this, so she refused to let it go. Fine, then I'll let you see the emperor. Chapter 675. Tang Zheng gestured towards the distance, and two figures walked out from behind an obstacle. It was the martial emperor and the heavenly emperor. The heavenly emperor was in a sorry state, but when he saw Junko, his expression immediately became excited. However, he was tightly controlled by the martial emperor and could not escape at all. He could only watch from afar. The two of them did not approach, but deliberately maintained a certain distance. Junko's eyes revealed a strange look, and said, "Let them come closer." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curled, and he sneered. "You want to save the heavenly emperor, right? Stop dreaming. Just looking from afar is enough. If you dare to push your luck, then there's nothing to talk about." How could Tang Zheng be led by the nose by the other party, and gradually took the initiative? Junko's expression changed, and she finally gritted her teeth and said, "All right, then listen carefully. The source of the news on the island is Li Palace." Li Palace? Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly constricted. Although Li Xiaotian's appearance had already made him guess, when he personally confirmed it, he was still very shocked. Li Xiaotian was hiding far away, and could vaguely hear the conversation between the two. When she heard that Junko did not hesitate to sell out Li Palace, she was furious, and her eyes were about to spit fire. Li Xiaotian gritted her teeth in hatred. This girl from the island nation was indeed not a trustworthy person to sell out Li Palace so cleanly. But she did not think about how she had sold out Tang Zheng back then, and almost took his life. It was truly a case of the pot calling the kettle black. As expected, it was Li Palace's doing. Li Palace's intelligence network is spread all over the world, and it is not a boast. Even this vast island could not escape their investigation. But why did they tell you this news? Because that island is closer to our country. Also, Li Palace is very clear that we have the strength to deal with those people. You have the strength? Humph, Don't lie. Those people are not weak people. What qualifications do you have to say that you can deal with them? Tang Zheng did not agree, because he was very clear about the strength of Wu Junshan and the rest. Junko smiled calmly and said, "Isn't the truth the best evidence?" Tang Zheng was speechless. After a while, he asked, "What did you do to them?" "Of course it's locked up." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. Since Wu Junshan and the others were not dead, it was not too late. "Where is it?" "Of course it's a very secret place. Without my guidance, outsiders wouldn't be able to find it even if they dug 3 feet into the ground." Junko said confidently. Tang Zheng glared at him. "Then aren't you afraid that I'll kill the Heavenly Emperor?" "Of course I am. So, let's make a deal. You give me the Emperor, and I'll tell you the location." "That's too unfair. I haven't even seen him, and I'm handing the Emperor over to you. Do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child? So easy to fool?" Tang Zheng said angrily. Junko hesitated for a moment, then said, "All right, I can hand him over to you, but you have to let the Emperor come over. I want to check if he's injured. If you did something to him, then there's no need to talk about it." Tang Zheng hesitated. Just what kind of trick was this Junko playing? As if she had seen through Tang Zheng's thoughts, Junko laughed mockingly. "Your cultivation is higher than mine. Don't tell me you're afraid of me?" Tang Zheng's heart moved. The other party's strength was not as good as his. Even if he brought the Emperor over for her to check, she wouldn't be able to play any tricks, let alone take him away from under his nose. "All right, if the Emperor is fine, then you have to use those people to exchange for the Emperor." Tang Zheng agreed. Junko smiled, tacitly agreeing to his suggestion. Tang Zheng waved his hand, and Marshall walked over with the Emperor. "Is there any news?" After walking closer, Marshall asked impatiently. Tang Zheng nodded, indicating for her to calm down, and said to Junko, "Check." Junko smiled in satisfaction. She extended her hand and touched the Emperor's body, as though she wanted to check if there was anything wrong with his body. Tang Zheng and Marshall were both cold. They looked at Junko without saying a word. Suddenly, the Emperor's face changed. He let out a heart-wrenching scream. "What are you doing?" Before he finished, Junko had already retreated. An autumn water-like sword appeared in her hand. The sword tip was still stained with blood, dripping to the ground. Junko's eyes released a biting, cold-killing intent. She coldly looked at the sinister-looking Emperor. The others were dumbstruck at this scene. Tang Zheng, Marshall, and even Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the shadows, all had their mouths wide open, to the point where a duck egg could be stuffed in. Damn, what the hell is going on? Why would Junko want to kill the Emperor? This world is too messed up. The 3 of their brains were not enough. Even if they were smart, they could not figure out what was going on. Blood flowed out from the Emperor's throat. His face was distorted from the pain, as though he was an evil spirit that crawled out from hell. You, so ruthless! The Emperor stretched out his finger, trembling as he pointed at Junko. Gasping for breath, he spoke intermittently. "You can't die!" Tang Zheng shouted. He immediately supported the Emperor, his fingers quickly poking his body, trying to save his life. But after a while, he realized that it was all in vain. The Emperor's heart had already been pierced through by the sword. His life was cut off. There was no way to save him. "Why did you kill him? Isn't he your Heavenly Emperor?" Tang Zheng roared hysterically at Junko. Without the Emperor as a hostage, the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the rest would be impossible to investigate. The other party had spent so much effort, even sacrificing the Emperor, so that they would not let Tang Zheng know of this news. It could be said that they had put in a lot of effort. Hearing this, Junko was unmoved. She smiled faintly and said, "How can you guess the Imperial Advisor's decision?" Marshall was unable to restrain his anger. He roared, "Without the Emperor, I will take you as a hostage." With that said, She disappeared from where she was and attacked Junko. Junko's left hand formed a seal, her right hand holding the sword. Her hand seals flew. The autumn water sword was immediately filled with a mysterious sword chi. Wong! Her arm suddenly shook. The autumn water sword vibrated. Waves of sword chi shot out from the autumn water sword, shooting towards Marshall. Marshall's face changed. When an expert made a move, one would know whether or not it was real. She had already determined that the opponent's sword technique was definitely not simple. Thus, she bellowed. Her right hand formed a blade, and waves of blazing chi surged out from her palm. She swung it fiercely. Boom! When the sword chi was hit by the roaring flame blade, it was like a surging river meeting a stone. With Marshall's palm as the origin, the sword chi flew to both sides. The surrounding trees and flowers were all hit by the sword chi, turning into ruins. It was a complete mess. Humph! You think you can beat me like this? Junko sneered and swung the autumn water sword. One turned into two, two turned into four. In the end, 16 autumn water swords were formed. Kill! Junko shouted. The 16 autumn water swords shot towards Marshall with the sound of wind and thunder. All three paths were blocked by the autumn water swords. Marshall's face sank. The opponent's cultivation was high beyond her expectations. She could not accurately judge Junko's cultivation, but she was sure that she was in the Xiantian realm. From the opponent's series of attacks, it could be determined that her cultivation was not inferior to Marshall's. Seeing this, Tang Zheng was deeply shocked. When he fought with Junko yesterday, Junko's strength was far from this. This meant that her cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds overnight. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The people of the imperial tutor's residence actually had such a foundation. In just one night, their cultivation could change so drastically. It seemed that the imperial tutor's residence was far more powerful than he had imagined. Seeing the autumn water swords coming at her, Marshall jumped into the air, dodging the attacks from the middle and lower paths, but the autumn water sword at the top continued to stab forward. Clang! Clang! Marshall used her hand as a blade. Flames rose into the air crackled. The roaring flame blade danced in the air, fiercely clashing with the autumn water swords. Boom! With a loud sound, the autumn water swords were annihilated, leaving only one behind, while Marshall flew back several meters before coming to a stop. Junko held her sword with one hand and stood proudly, looking at Marshall with sparks in their eyes. In this exchange, both sides were evenly matched. The one with the most complicated feelings was not the person involved, but Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the dark. Her cultivation was on the same level as Marshall in the past, but ever since Marshall and Tang Zheng came together, they had mysteriously suppressed her. Now, even an island nation girl's cultivation was higher than hers. She really wanted to find a piece of tofu and kill herself. Her heart was fiercely hit. She had always been good at scheming, but now she realized that she was simply neglecting the essentials and chasing after the trifles. Even something as fundamental as martial arts had been abandoned. She looked from afar with a complicated expression, biting her lips, all sorts of feelings welling up in her heart. At this time, Tang Zheng realized that the emperor's head was tilted to one side. He had completely lost his life. His mood could not help but become gloomy. Junko, since the emperor is dead, then you will have to replace him as a hostage. With that, his feet flashed, and he appeared in front of Junko, stretching out his hand and grabbing towards her shoulder. Junko quickly retreated, leaving a long trail on the ground. Tang Zheng was like a shadow, his finger getting closer and closer. So, the autumn water sword danced in the air. It was like a waterfall flying through the air, stirring towards Tang Zheng's finger. Ding! Tang Zheng flicked his finger, and the autumn water sword was knocked away, his 5 fingers moving together, about to grab the opponent. But the autumn water sword welcomed it. It was like an unkillable cockroach. Tang Zheng snorted, his hand turned into a fist, and heavily smashed down. Pung! With a muffled sound, the fist fiercely landed on the autumn water sword, the sword chi rippled, and Junko turned into a shooting star, flying backwards. Tang Zheng's speed was even faster before she landed. He was already standing below her, ready to capture her alive. Junko was in midair, looking at Tang Zheng below. She did not despair, but her eyes became abnormally firm. Chapter 676. Tang Zheng stared intently at the complex hand seals in her hand. Initially, when she used ninjutsu, she used hand seals, and the same when she used swordsmanship. He gradually realized that this was probably a trigger mechanism of ninjutsu, which could only be used by hand seals. However, this was completely different from the Emperor's younger brother he had seen before, as well as the Grandmaster martial artist from a few days ago. They didn't need these complicated hand seals to use ninjutsu, and they could use it anytime and anywhere. In fact, it was not difficult to understand, and he soon figured out the reason. Perhaps Junko's cultivation was not high enough, so she couldn't use ninjutsu at will. She had to rely on these handprints to do so. His guess was right. There was a big difference between ninjutsu and Hua Xia's magic, because ninjutsu was only the tip of the iceberg, and many of the core things were not learned. But island nation people were not stupid. After generations of research, they finally found another way to remedy this problem, and that was hand seals. These complicated hand seals were created and passed down by generations of ninjutsu masters. Before a ninja breaks through to the grandmaster level, they must rely on these complicated hand seals to perform ninjutsu. Therefore, for an ordinary ninja, the speed of hand seals is directly related to the strength of their attack power and attack power. Junko was obviously one of the best among them. Her slender fingers flew, and the hand seals were completed. Seeing that she was about to fall into Tang Zheng's palm, she stretched out her hand and collided with Tang Zheng's hand. She staggered and fell to the ground. Tang Zheng's foot moved, and he approached her. His hand was like a dragon claw, reaching for her head. Suddenly she shouted, "Escape!" A strange scene appeared. She actually disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, as if she had never appeared before. Marshall and Li Xiaotian were surprised to see this scene. They originally looked down on the island nation's ninjutsu, but now it seems that they were just frogs in a well. Ninjutsu had many praiseworthy points. Wasn't this scene the best proof? Tang Zheng's face turned cold and said, "Is it another illusion? Let's see where you can hide." Tang Zheng urged his Shunqi and crazily circulated it. He sensed the fluctuation in the air. Gradually, his brows wrinkled. There was no fluctuation. Did she really disappear? How was this possible? How could it disappear so quickly? Even Tang Zheng's earth-shrinking technique was unable to do so. Strange. She had called out, "Escape," just now. Could this be the legendary escape technique? Tang Zheng had heard of this technique from the Heaven Monk before. In fact, the shrinking earth into an inch was the embryonic form of this escape technique, but the escape technique was even more mystical, and its speed was even faster than the shrinking earth into an inch. Tang Zheng frowned, waved his hand, and said, "Marshal, we can't kill her for the time being. In order to find the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's mansion, in order to save those people, her life must be preserved for the time being. There's no need. Don't you want to know the information in her mind? Just use the soul-searching technique, and no secrets can be hidden." Hiss! When Tang Zheng heard this, he sucked in a breath of cold air. A woman against a woman. It was indeed the most brutal. Li Xiaotian, listen carefully. Tell me the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's mansion now. Otherwise, when I use the soul-searching technique, not only will your secrets be exposed, You will also become a fool because of this, and will no longer be able to stir up trouble. You really are ruthless." Li Xiaotian glared hatefully at Marshall, wishing that he could swallow her whole. "Since you understand, then tell me the truth," Tang Zheng urged. "Ha! If I were you, I wouldn't believe this silly woman's words. She's tall and strong, but her brain isn't working well. You can get the information by killing me, but how are you going to enter the Imperial Advisor's mansion?" Li Xiaotian smiled coldly and asked in ridicule, "What do you mean by that?" Tang Zheng asked, "The Imperial Advisor's mansion is not that easy to enter, and it is even more difficult to see the Imperial Advisor. It is impossible for ordinary people, but my identity is special, and I can freely enter and leave the Imperial Advisor's mansion. So, if I die, then I won't be able to bring you there." Li Xiaotian said tirelessly. Although Tang Zheng still had his doubts, he already believed her for the most part. The Imperial Advisor's mansion was so mysterious, there must be a lot of soldiers guarding it. If Li Xiaotian could bring them in, then everything would be much easier. However, the key was whether or not her words could be trusted. The last time Tang Zheng believed her, he was almost killed. If he were to enter the tiger's den again, it would not be so easy. "Tang Zheng, don't believe her. She's a cunning woman. Let's find another way." Marshall anxiously advised. This answer is actually very simple. If you want to save someone, then you have to leave me alive. Otherwise, let me die together with those people." Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said, Chapter 677. Seeing that Tang Zheng had promised to believe in Li Xiaotian, Wu wanted to say something but hesitated. Actually, she was also very conflicted in her heart. On one hand, she desperately wanted to save them, so she had to choose to believe in Li Xiaotian. On the other hand, her intuition and experience told her that Li Xiaotian was full of lies, and she could not easily believe her. However, Tang Zheng had already made his decision, so she put those words back into her stomach. Li Xiaotian secretly heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at Wu complacently. Wu Quan pretended not to see it. His gaze turned, sweeping across the Sky Emperor's corpse on the ground, and asked with a frown, "What should we do?" Tang Zheng looked at the stiff Sky Emperor and sighed regretfully. The people from the Imperial Tutor's mansion were truly ruthless, even daring to kill the Sky Emperor, who knew what kind of medicine they were selling in their gourd. A dead person no longer had any value. Tang Zheng waved his hand and said, "Let's go. There's no need to bother with him." However, with the death of the Sky Emperor, the chaos in the island nation will definitely worsen. Let's just sit back and watch the show. Li Xiaotian looked at the Sky Emperor's corpse absent-mindedly, his brows knitted, as though he was thinking about something. Seeing that, Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped in his tracks and asked, "What are you thinking about?" As if waking up from a dream, Li Xiaotian revealed a brilliant smile and said, "Nothing." However, there was still a lingering doubt in the depths of his eyes. The three of them left the scene, leaving behind the Sky Emperor's corpse lying quietly on the ground. The final destination of the ruler of a country was incomparably desolate. The three of them disguised themselves and passed through the crowd. Looking at the parade on the street, the corner of Tang Zheng's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Although his trip to the island nation this time was filled with danger, he had also gained a lot. He had actually turned the island nation upside down, which could be considered a lesson for this country. Suddenly, a commotion came from the crowd in front of him. Immediately, everyone swarmed towards that direction. What's going on? The three of them looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. Why don't we go take a look? Li Xiaotian suggested. Wu immediately rejected. No, don't think that we don't know what you're thinking. You want to take advantage of the chaos to escape, right? In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, we will continue to advance towards the imperial advisor's residence. Tang Zheng considered for a moment and was about to nod in agreement when he heard a voice coming from afar. This voice is so familiar. He pricked up his ears and looked up. In the distance, he saw a familiar figure speaking passionately in front of a microphone on a huge electronic screen. Damn it! Tang Zheng was flabbergasted as he cursed loudly. Wu and Li Xiaoyan's reactions were similar as they stared straight at the person on the screen. Isn't the emperor dead? Why is he speaking on the screen? What is going on? Looking at the excited reaction of the island nation people, it was clear that this was not a video, but a real person speaking, especially the mess behind him in the Kokyo. It was clear that he was standing in front of the Kokyo and speaking live. In other words, this was not a video, but a live broadcast. But dozens of minutes ago, they had seen the emperor die in the hands of Junko with their own eyes. Tang Zheng had personally checked and could be 100% sure that he was dead. What the hell? Wasn't this the situation? Although they couldn't understand what the other party was saying, it was obvious that after hearing his speech, the emotions of the island nation people gradually calmed down and even cheered thunderously. The emperor was a spiritual symbol of the island nation. Previously, it was rumored that the emperor had been captured, and the authorities had always been perfunctory, so the people of the island nation were completely flustered, causing a series of riots. At this moment, after hearing the emperor's speech, he accused the rumors of being a conspiracy of the enemy forces, telling the people not to believe it. Li Xiaotian had been staring at the emperor on the screen. Suddenly, she raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in realization, "I know." "What do you know?" Tang Zheng and Wu immediately turned their heads to look at her. "I know what's going on. No wonder Junko would kill that person without mercy, because that person is not the real emperor," Li Xiaotian said solemnly. Tang Zheng and Wu were shocked. They didn't understand what she meant. "We've all been deceived. The island nation people are too cunning. They actually pushed out a substitute to block the wind and rain and confuse everyone," Li Xiaotian said hatefully. She had always been the one to lie to others. When had she ever been deceived like this? But this time, she was careless and was actually deceived by a group of island nation people for so long, playing in circles. She was truly furious. Tang Zheng and Wu were not idiots. After thinking about it, they went through all the clues that had led to this. Gradually, they realized that what Li Xiaotian said was probably true. They had really been played by the island nation people. No, not only them, the people of the island nation, and even the people of the entire world had been played by the island nation people. It turned out that the island nation had always nurtured a substitute for the emperor, and when necessary, they would push it out as a scapegoat. The imperial tutor's mansion was clearly aware of this, which was why they killed the scapegoat without hesitation. "I was saying that the emperor's body had a hidden illness. How could it be as if nothing had happened? So he was just a fake. The real emperor was the person on the screen." Li Xiaotian pointed at the screen and said fiercely. Tang Zheng once again looked over. Although the emperor's words were sonorous and powerful, as if he was full of spirit, in Tang Zheng's eyes, his spirit was all faked. How could the illness between his brows escape Tang Zheng's fiery eyes? "He is the real emperor. He is really sick," Tang Zheng said. "So the person I've been capturing is a substitute, damn it." "But why did the real emperor not come out a while ago, allowing the country to be in turmoil, but now he came out again?" Wu asked suspiciously. Li Xiaotian laughed coldly and joked, "Your head is too simple. You can't even figure out such a simple question." Wu's face turned cold as he said, "Say that again." Tang Zheng hurriedly dissuaded him and explained, "This is the cunning part of the other party. They know very well that we don't know that we caught an imposter. If the real emperor were to appear, then we would know. Although it's a fake, it's still hard to distinguish between the real emperor and the fake. It's the same for us and for others. If we knew the truth, we could still use the fake in our hands. We could casually broadcast it all over the world and make him admit that he is the real emperor. Then, the dignity of the royal family would be gone. In fact, they would be afraid that we would kill the fake in front of the people. That would be the real deal. Even if they were to push out the real emperor, the people would not completely believe them. In short, only when the fake is confirmed to be dead will the real emperor dare to come out and refute the rumors. The imperial advisor's mansion really played a good hand. They used the news of Wu Junshan and the others to deceive us, and then took the opportunity to kill the emperor, completely destroying the card in our hands. Humph, they really put in a lot of effort. Tang Zheng spoke tirelessly, causing Wu to come to a realization. He gradually understood the mystery behind it and couldn't help but sigh at the cunning of the island nation people. Li Xiaotian, haven't you always been in cahoots with the people of the island nation? Don't tell me you don't know about the matter of the monk? Tang Zheng asked. Li Xiaotian smiled bitterly. This must be the top secret of the island nation. Do you think I would know? Then does that mean that the other information that Junko said is also fake, Master, and the others are not in the hands of the imperial advisor's mansion? Wu exclaimed. Tang Zheng's face darkened as he fell into deep thought. To be honest, he was truly unable to determine this point. The imperial advisor's mansion's tricks were too powerful. He was unable to accurately determine which sentence was true and which sentence was false. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said that might not be the case. The imperial advisor personally admitted that he imprisoned Wu Junshan and the others. Really? Tang Zheng was skeptical. I know you don't believe me. As for whether you believe me or not this time, it all depends on you. Li Xiaotian shrugged and said indifferently. Tang Zheng and Wu looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. Wu took a deep breath and said, "Trust her again." Tang Zheng nodded. Li Xiaotian laughed. "Smart. If you don't believe me, then there's no need to go to the imperial advisor's mansion." Humph. Since that's the case, then continue leading the way. The three of them continued forward. After passing through the bustling city, they realized that the gathered people had gradually dispersed. All of them had satisfied smiles on their faces. The appearance of the heavenly emperor had truly appeased these people. Wu said unwillingly, "Let's go back and get the heavenly emperor's corpse. Then we'll expose it to the public. I wonder if it will cause a bit of a stir." Tang Zheng shook his head. "It's useless, not to mention that the imposter's corpse is definitely long gone. Even if we find it, it's useless. A dead person is not as useful as a living person. This time we've been tricked by the other party. We must be more careful in the future." After saying that, he subconsciously raised his head to look at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian felt his gaze, but remained calm and composed as he walked in front alone. Li Xiaotian, you have a cooperation with the imperial advisor's mansion, and now you are bringing us to the imperial advisor's mansion. Aren't you afraid that the imperial advisor's mansion will turn hostile and deal with you instead? Tang Zheng asked curiously. In any case, I am not on the same path as the imperial advisor's mansion. Are you afraid that they will fall out with me? Li Xiaotian said indifferently. What kind of place is the imperial advisor's mansion? If you go, you will definitely be disappointed, because the imperial advisor's mansion is just a small village. It is like a paradise without any outsiders to disturb it. This is a place that many ancient scholars yearn for. However, Tang Zheng frowned and said, "A beautiful appearance often means danger. The more beautiful it is, the more deceptive it is." Hee hee, are you hinting at me? Li Xiaotian covered his mouth and chuckled. I'll take it as a compliment. This is the most beautiful compliment I've ever heard. Shameless, Wu complained indignantly. Li Xiaotian turned a deaf ear to him and continued, although the imperial advisor's mansion is quiet and beautiful, there are dangers hidden within. This is without a doubt. So if you barge in, you must be prepared to sacrifice yourselves. You don't have to worry about it. Just lead the way. Chapter 678. Tang Zheng and Marshall hurriedly looked over. There was chaos in front of them, and a thick fog shrouded them, making it impossible to see the path ahead clearly. Something strange. Duan Yen said. Tang Zheng looked at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said, Of course not anyone can enter the imperial tutor's mansion. I am a guest of the imperial tutor's mansion, so of course I have the authority. After he finished speaking, he took out a token and pressed it against the whirlpool. The thick fog began to fluctuate violently, and not long after, a small path appeared beneath his feet. Do you dare to go in? Li Xiaotian laughed mischievously. Tang Zheng did not say a word and took the lead to walk in with large strides. In fact, this was just a trick, a type of illusion technique. To Tang Zheng, it was not unfamiliar, and it was not that amazing. The key was that Tang Zheng could not predict what kind of danger lay behind the fog. But now that things had come to this, he had no way out. Even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, he still had to barge in. Marshall followed without hesitation. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth hooked up into a meaningful smile, and followed behind the two of them. Not long after, the thick fog gradually dissipated, and the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. A quiet village appeared in front of them. Small bridges, flowing water, green grass, shady trees, blue sky, and white clouds. It was as if they had traveled to an ancient paradise. There was no hustle and bustle of modern society, making people feel relaxed and happy. This is the imperial tutor's mansion. Tang Zheng and Marshall asked in astonishment, Welcome to the imperial tutor's mansion. Li Xiaotian said with a smile. Looking at the sparse houses, Tang Zheng became extremely alert and asked, Where is the imperial tutor? Li Xiaotian pointed to the deepest part of the village and said, That small wooden house. Tang Zheng suppressed the emotions in his heart and walked over. Marshall and Li Xiaotian also quickly followed. Li Xiaotian rolled his eyes with suspicion and thought, Why is it so quiet all around? There's not even a sound, and there's not even a shadow. She still remembered the various disciples of the imperial preceptor's mansion a few days ago, but today these people seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Something must be wrong when things are out of the ordinary. However, Li Xiaotian didn't say anything. He just silently followed Tang Zheng, ready to go. The cabin was not far away, and it did not take long for the three of them to arrive in front of it. Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped in his tracks, circulating his jinqi. Zhang Xian focused his mind and held his breath. His perception increased rapidly. Someone. A strong breathing sound entered his ears clearly. Be careful, there's someone. Tang Zheng warned in a low voice. Creak. The imperial preceptor's mansion scheme was linked to one another. It was hard to guard against. Even someone as meticulous as Li Xiaotian was not able to see through it. But at this juncture, he couldn't care less about whether or not it was a trap. Since he was in danger, he should make the first move to gain the upper hand. Thus, before he finished speaking, Tang Zheng had already made the first move. With a schwa sound, the war soul sword pierced towards the opponent's chest. Now that he was killing an enemy, he didn't show any mercy. The war soul sword's brilliant might caused people's hearts to tremble in fear. Whoosh! a gust of wind blew out from the wooden house. Bang! The gust of wind struck the War Soul sword, and Tang Zheng's attack collapsed. He staggered back a step and looked at the dim wooden house in shock. Who? This person actually escaped his perception. When he circulated his energy to sense again, he still found that the wooden house was empty. However, it was clear that there was an expert hidden inside. Could it be the legendary Imperial Preceptor? Tang Zheng and Marshall looked at each other, both of them guessing this point. The Imperial Preceptor was one of the most mysterious people in the island nation. He was also one of the most powerful people. Such an expert was actually living in seclusion in such a small wooden house. Moreover, before he even saw Lu Shan's true face, Tang Zheng was already intimidated by the other party's casual counterattack. This person's strength is definitely something I've never seen before in my life. Tang Zheng came to a conclusion. This Imperial Preceptor was undoubtedly an expert of the Grand Master realm. As for what level of Grand Master he was, it was still impossible to determine. However, Tang Zheng understood that if he was alone, he would definitely not be his match. However, with the 4 symbols venerable by his side, he was much more confident. He took a step forward and said, "Hiding your head and showing your tail, don't you dare to come out and see me?" Junko mocked. "Who do you think you are? Is the Imperial Preceptor someone you can meet just because you want to? Is that so? Then I'll tear down your little hut and see how you're going to hide." Tang Zheng held onto the War Soul sword with both hands and growled, "Return to origin." He immediately used the 5th move of the Heaven-Flying Immortal, Return to Origin. This was already the pinnacle of the Heaven-Flying Immortal sword technique that he cultivated. In the blink of an eye, the War Soul sword became ordinary and fell towards the small wooden hut. Clang! A clear and melodious sound came out from the small wooden hut, as if a sword had been unsheathed. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold, but his return to origin sword move was not affected in the slightest. Whiz! With a sound of breaking through the air, a cold light shot out and struck the War Soul sword. Clang! An intense spark flew in all directions, and the War Soul sword could no longer fall any further. Taking a closer look, what flew over was actually a sword, but the sword was already covered in dust and was dim. However, when facing the War Soul sword, it was not at a disadvantage at all and steadily stopped it. Tang Zheng's eyes bulged. He took a deep breath and changed his sword move. The powerful and heavy Heaven-Flying Immortal's 4th move, Heaven Falls Earth Rends, was unleashed. Clang! The War Soul sword fiercely slashed onto the Nameless sword, causing it to tremble and fall to the ground with a pada sound. Tang Zheng was shaken. The terrifying force that came from the Nameless sword was truly not to be underestimated. Let's see what other tricks you have up your sleeve. Tang Zheng once again used his greatsword, determined to destroy the small wooden hut. But just as he raised the War Soul sword, 3 piercing sounds resounded through the clouds, and 3 cold beams of light flew over. Damn, why are there so many swords? Tang Zheng thought that the sword just now was the other party's sword, but it was obvious that he was wrong. The 3 arrows that flew over were all different. There were long swords, short swords, and heavy swords. It was impossible for a person to use so many swords. However, the lethality of these 3 swords was extremely terrifying. Left, middle, right, 3 directions firmly locked onto Tang Zheng, leaving him with nowhere to dodge. Tang Zheng's expression was solemn. The War Soul sword let out a clear sword cry, buzzing and trembling, as if it was excited to meet an expert. Break! Tang Zheng roared, and in the blink of an eye, he attacked 3 times. Wind rising clouds surging, sword breaking 1,000 caddies, lightning sparks flint. 3 Heaven-Flying Immortal sword technique. 3 completely different offensive sword moves, yet they were perfectly fused together. Ding ding dang dang. Sparks flew in all directions. The 3 different swords were all knocked down, but Tang Zheng also staggered back, his arms trembling, and the War Soul sword almost fell out of his hands. Junko's face changed. She thought to herself, Tang Zheng is indeed powerful to be able to receive 2 moves of the Imperial Master's 4 swords, but he did not suffer much damage. But so what? It was still impossible for him to be a match for the Imperial Master. Junko was extremely confident. She stood at the door and looked at Tang Zheng in ridicule. Tang Zheng's face turned pale white. Wu immediately asked in a low voice, "How is it?" "The enemy is tricky. Be careful later," Tang Zheng warned, and then patted Xiao Bai's head. "Xiao Bai, act according to the situation later. Protect Wu well." A gentle light flashed across Wu Wu's eyes. The words of rejection were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back down. Chapter 679. You want to destroy this old man's hut? Ha! This is the dream of many people. However, these people often turn into skeletons in the end, leaving behind only their swords that are buried in my sword tomb. The Imperial advisor's voice was neither fast nor slow, but every syllable was extremely powerful, like a heavy hammer striking one's heart. Sword tomb. Tang Zheng's heart moved. He looked over, and sure enough, there was a huge pit in the dimly lit room, and there were many swords stuck in it. Could it be that those swords just now flew out from the sword tomb? The so-called sword tomb, as the name implied, was the tomb of the sword. According to the Imperial advisor, these swords were all left behind by the people who challenged him after they died, so they were called sword tomb. Not only were these swords buried, it was also equivalent to burying their original owners. He could vaguely tell that there were over 100 swords in the sword tomb, which meant that there were over 100 people with superb swordsmanship who came to challenge him. And in the end, they all lost their lives. After going through hundreds of battles, it should be nothing more than this. Tang Zheng sighed. So what if it's the sword tomb? What's buried are all dead things. How can it bury people? Tang Zheng said with a resounding voice, "Ha, then I'll let you die here. Let's see if you can still boast so shamelessly." The Imperial advisor said coldly, just as his voice disappeared. The sword in the sword tomb started to buzz and tremble as if it had a life of its own. Tang Zheng's face changed. He kept the War Soul sword and switched to using the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. When Li Xiaotian saw the 2 divine armaments, his eyes immediately erupted with a blazing light. He wished that he could immediately snatch them over and take them for himself. Clang, clang, clang. The sharp sword soared into the air and flew out from the sword tomb. They floated in the air as an invisible force controlled them. So. The sharp swords changed their direction and aimed at Tang Zheng. The sound of them tearing through the air was like 10,000 arrows shooting towards Tang Zheng at the same time. Wung! The bowstring vibrated, and the shooting sun arrow at the tip of his finger left his hand. Boom! Ka-cha! The shooting sun arrows hit the sharp swords, and the sound of breaking rang out one after another. The first few swords broke into pieces and fell to the ground. However, the attack of the shooting sun arrows dissipated because of these swords, and they fell to the ground with a clatter. Tang Zheng was shocked. Last time in the Kokyo, so many people from the island nation were unable to block the shooting sun arrows. But this time, a single sword was able to wear down the shooting sun arrows. This was enough to show how powerful and domineering the Imperial Tutor's attack was. The attacks of the other swords did not slow down at all, and they continued to fly towards him at lightning speed. Tang Zheng didn't have time to feel sorry for the shooting sun arrow on the ground. He continuously pulled the bowstring and released 2 shooting sun arrows at the same time to meet the overwhelming sharp swords. Boom! 2 loud noises were heard, followed by another cracking sound. Tang Zheng did not have the time to appreciate his own battle achievements as he pulled Wu and quickly moved to the side. The sound of something tearing through the air brushed past their ears, and a few cold lights flew past them. If they were still standing there, their bodies would definitely be pierced through. Without a doubt, the result of this attack was already very clear. Tang Zheng had used 3 shooting sun arrows, and although he had destroyed dozens of his opponent's sharp swords, the Imperial Tutor still controlled the remaining sharp swords and almost killed him. The difference in strength was obvious. Even though Tang Zheng had the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows, he was still unable to gain the upper hand. This Imperial Tutor is at least at the 6th level of the Grandmaster stage. Tang Zheng guessed with his own experience. For a small country to be able to cultivate to such a level, he could already be considered to have reached the peak. It could also be seen how astonishing his talent was. Meeting such a genius, and a veteran genius at that, Tang Zheng's pressure increased exponentially. Only now did he understand why the Imperial Tutor was so calm and confident, because the other party did have the ability. Looking at the shooting sun arrows that had fallen to the ground not far away, Tang Zheng was in pain. If this thing fell into the hands of the other party, it would be a huge loss. As if they had a tacit understanding, Xiao Bai jumped down from Tang Zheng's shoulder and turned into a white light as it rushed into the house. "Humph, you little thing, do you still dare to come and die?" The Imperial Tutor did not take it seriously at all, and said with a murderous aura. The broken sword fragments on the ground rose into the air and turned into specks of cold light, shooting towards Xiao Bai from all directions, as if they wanted to turn it into a hedgehog. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with a red light as it squeaked and opened its mouth. Boom! Flames soared into the sky, and the broken sword fragments in all directions were completely enveloped by the flames. They fell to the ground one after another, and some even melted into a pool of molten iron. The flames spread in all directions and quickly ignited the wooden walls. The small house immediately turned into a sea of fire. The Imperial Tutor and Junko obviously did not expect this situation. Junko was stunned, and only the raging flames were left in her eyes. The Imperial Preceptor let out an angry roar. "You're more valuable than anyone else here. Because you're a cultivator, you've systematically learned magic. The island nation's ninjutsu, with the support of the essence of these magic, will rapidly rise, develop, and become even more powerful." The Imperial Tutor didn't hide anything and admitted without restraint. Tang Zheng's heart jumped. He actually guessed correctly. This Imperial Tutor really had a good plan. His plan was so far-sighted that it was unexpected. Just like what the Imperial Tutor had said, if the island nation's ninjutsu had the essence of Hua Xia's magic, then there would definitely be a qualitative leap. For such a nation, if they were given the opportunity to increase their strength, then their self-confidence would also increase. In the end, they would definitely bully the weak and even start a war. This was the nature of this nation. Dogs can't change their habit of eating shit. "Even if you catch me, I won't reveal half a word to you," Tang Zheng said resolutely. The Imperial Tutor didn't mind. He faintly smiled and said, "You don't need to speak. I have my own ways to know the information in your mind." Tang Zheng was shocked. He immediately remembered the soul-searching technique. This kind of magic wasn't too difficult. There were also many mysterious ninjutsu techniques. Perhaps there was a similar magic to the soul-searching technique. Therefore, as long as Tang Zheng fell into the hands of the Imperial Tutor, no matter how tight his mouth was, it would be useless. Tang Zheng fiercely stared at the Imperial Tutor. Looking at the confidence between his eyebrows, Tang Zheng gnashed his teeth in hatred. The opponent's plan was too accurate, one step after another, inviting him to fall into the trap. Tang Zheng unconsciously fell into the trap. Miss Li, when you go back this time, please pass on my gratitude to your palace master. Without you, it would be impossible for me to capture Tang Zheng and complete the great plan that I have dreamed of for so many years. The state preceptor said happily, as if victory was already in his grasp. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression. She couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness. She had always thought that her plan was flawless. This time, the island nations suffered a fatal Waterloo. The older, the wiser. In front of the state preceptor, this old ginger, her scheme seemed a little too immature. Li Xiaotian, you also didn't think that there would be such a result, right? Let me tell you, if he really captured me and let him know the secret of Hua Xia's magic, and then combined it with ninjutsu, do you think that your martial arts will be a match for his ninjutsu? At that time, when you kill all the cultivators, that will be the time for the island nation to make a comeback. Tang Zheng said jokingly. Li Xiaotian's face was very ugly. She slowly said, I also didn't think that it would turn out like this. She was a little regretful. Chapter 680. At this point, there was no turning back. No matter how much Li Xiaotian regretted, it was useless as he hung his head dejectedly as if he was grieving for his parents. Tang Zheng had already secretly circulated his innate qi and warned Marshall in a low voice. Wait a moment. I will delay the imperial teacher. You escape first. Marshall remained unmoved as she stared straight at the imperial advisor. With a shout, she had already rushed out first. Tang Zheng fiercely stomped his foot. Marshall was good at everything, but she was often impulsive and rushed forward. Wasn't it precisely these qualities that separated her from Li Xiaotian? Both of them were important members of the mysterious organization, but Marshall's straightforwardness was completely different from Li Xiaotian's craftiness. This caused Tang Zheng to unknowingly have a good impression of Marshall and gradually develop hatred towards Li Xiaotian. Marshall rushed forward and closed in on the imperial teacher in the blink of an eye, but the imperial teacher did not even put her in his eyes. How dare you? A graceful figure blocked in front of the imperial teacher as Junko stared at Marshall with a frosty expression. She extended her arm, and the autumn water sword was already swinging with sword chi as it pierced towards Marshall. Marshall waved her hand, and the roaring flame blade brought forth a string of raging flames. The air surged as she fought fiercely with Junko. The imperial teacher passed by the two and walked straight towards Tang Zheng. He smiled and said, Don't make any unnecessary resistance. The one who will suffer will be you. If you are willing to submit to me, I can let bygones be bygones. In the future, you will be able to reach a position above millions of people. This is something that many people dream of. Above millions of people. I'm afraid that I will be below you. Tang Zheng sneered. Of course, everyone will be restricted, and you are no exception. However, this is already a supreme power. The imperial teacher said, as if it was a matter of course. You really have an extraordinarily big ambition. Tang Zheng sighed, as his guess was not wrong. The imperial teacher had the ambition of a wolf and was probably no different from those who started the war. The people of the island nation indeed had wild ambitions hidden in their hearts. Once they had the chance, they would unreservedly reveal them. Thank you for the compliment. This is the long-cherished wish of the island nation's ancestors. Of course, I have the obligation and responsibility to help them achieve it. The imperial tutor said proudly. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth, unable to refute. With a thought, he shouted, Then we'll talk about it after you pass this test. Boom. The gigantic body of the four symbols venerable immediately appeared. Both of its feet landed on the ground, causing the ground to tremble incessantly. Even the nearby stream splashed up. The imperial advisor raised his head to look at the four symbols' lords. His face was slightly astonished as he exclaimed, "Is this the giant that wreaked havoc in the imperial palace? Even missiles can't hurt it. It's really extraordinary." After pausing for a moment, greed flooded the Grand Preceptor's eyes. He stared at the four symbols venerable with scorching light and said, "Huaxia really does have a deep heritage. Even you have the fortune to obtain something so powerful. If I can obtain it, I'll be even more powerful." Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. His opponent was really bold. He was actually thinking about the four symbols venerable again. "Humph, you'll have to have the ability to do so first." Tang Zheng said coldly. The four symbols venerable was his greatest reliance. He had faced many Grandmaster-level experts and was able to escape unscathed, all because of the four symbols venerable. However, he could clearly sense that the four symbols venerable was not in its best condition after summoning it this time. A few days ago in the Imperial Palace, the four symbols venerable was hit by missiles. Even Tang Zheng vomited blood. The four symbols venerable was damaged. Later on, Tang Zheng was unable to find a way to completely repair the four symbols venerable, which led to the current sequelae. He had originally planned to properly repair the four symbols venerable after returning to the country. He did not expect to have to use it again so soon. Would the damaged four symbols venerable be able to withstand the imperial advisor? Tang Zheng had no idea. This battle was the most uneasy he had ever been in so many battles. Not only did it concern his personal survival, but it also concerned the lives of martial artists Wu Junshan and the others. The weight of the responsibility on his shoulders was unprecedentedly heavy. It was so heavy that he could barely breathe. The imperial advisor was not intimidated by the four symbols venerable. He strode over and said, "Then let me see its battle prowess." Evidently, he was exceptionally confident in his own strength. Tang Zheng jumped onto the four symbols venerable without a word and disappeared into its chest. Xiao Bai also jumped onto the four symbols venerable's shoulder. It bared its teeth at the imperial advisor, its battle intent soaring. The imperial advisor stood with his hands behind his back. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and shot into the air, charging straight at the four symbols venerable. The four symbols venerable dodged nimbly. However, it was too big in the end and could not evade in time. The imperial advisor's foot landed on its chest. Boom! Tang Zheng felt as if an earthquake had struck. He was on the verge of collapsing as a sharp ringing sound in his ears almost tore his eardrums apart. Even though Tang Zheng had expected this, he was still shocked by the might of a single attack. He only cultivated a half-baked ninjutsu. How could he have such power? Tang Zheng was indignant. However, he also understood that it was definitely because the other party's talent was too great. He must be a genius of all kinds. Tang Zheng was not wrong. Everyone in the imperial advisor's residence was very talented. They were all outstanding figures who far surpassed ordinary people. They were geniuses elected by the entire nation. The imperial advisor was a genius among geniuses. It was not hard to imagine how powerful they were. It could be said that Huaxia was lacking in this aspect. There were many sects, each of them fighting openly and covertly. The internal friction was too severe. Island Nation had few people and land, but it could not stop the other party's internal and external unity. They used the entire nation's power to cultivate talents. Naturally, their results were extraordinary. Tang Zheng did not have time to sigh because the imperial advisor rushed up again. This time, he did not use the tip of his foot, but his finger aimed at the venerable four symbol's chest. The imperial advisor was very smart. He did not attack the other parts of the Venerable Four Symbols. He understood that the Venerable Four Symbols' body was impenetrable, so he deliberately chose the chest. This was where Tang Zheng had disappeared. The door in the chest was definitely the Venerable Four Symbols' life gate. His choice was correct. When Tang Zheng saw the rapidly approaching finger, he subconsciously placed his fists in front of his chest. Boom! The finger touched the Venerable Four Symbols' fist. A puff of green smoke rose. A white spot was left on the fist as if it had been burned. A white spot! Tang Zheng looked at it in shock, as his heart was in turmoil. The four divine beasts had fought with him so many times, but no matter if it was swords, blades, guns, or even missiles, none of them were able to leave a single mark on the four divine beasts. But this time, he had miscalculated. The Imperial Advisor's seemingly light finger actually left a white spot. It was completely possible to imagine the destructive power contained in that finger. So large and so nimble. What a great treasure! The Imperial Advisor's thoughts became more and more heated. You can block me once, but can you block me this time? He raised his arm, and his expression became abnormally cold. Killing intent filled his body. Tang Zheng guarded his mind and focused all his attention. However, he did not see the Imperial Advisor's next move. He could not help but feel puzzled. Why was he bluffing like this? Was he trying to show off? Of course not. Li Xiaotian had also been observing the Imperial Advisor. From his attacks, she came to a shocking conclusion. The Imperial Advisor's strength was not inferior to Li Palace's palace master, Granny Li. One had to know that Li Palace was one of the three great mysterious organizations. The other clans could not compare. Chapter 681, Dark Flame Divine Palm. The martial arts manual that Tang Zheng took out from the first floor of Langya Pavilion. Back then, he took out a total of 2 things from the first floor of Langya Pavilion. In addition to this martial arts manual, there was also a mysterious box. Wu Zui had been immersed in practicing the Inferno Divine Palm for some time now, but she had never used it properly. At this moment, the roaring flame saber was no longer enough to deal with Junko, so she had no choice but to use the dark flame divine palm. The dark flame divine palm and the roaring flame saber had something in common. They both cultivated the inner strength to become more overbearing. However, the dark flame divine palm was clearly superior. This was the understanding that Wu had since she started cultivating. It was precisely because the dark flame divine palm was too overbearing that it was especially difficult to cultivate. Although she had been cultivating for so long, she had not completely grasped the essence of the dark flame divine palm. At this point, she could not care so much. She circulated the dark flame divine palm's mental cultivation method, and her palms immediately turned fiery red, as if they had turned into flames. The surrounding air rippled as if it was producing dense qi. Junko's face was cold as she stared at this scene. She knew that the opponent had changed their martial arts. Although they had not exchanged blows yet, she could already tell that this martial arts manual was extraordinary. Junko was not afraid. After all, their cultivation levels were similar. Of course, even if they changed their martial arts, how powerful could it be? The autumn water sword swung through the air, and with a sharp sound, it pierced towards Wu. Wu's cheeks also turned crimson. Her entire body seemed to be burning as she pushed her palms forward. Waves of heat rolled as if an invisible flame was gushing out from her palms, wanting to burn everything in the world. Bang! Her palms once again slapped the autumn water sword. The autumn water sword immediately turned fiery red, as if it had been melted by the high temperature. Ah! Junko could not help but let out a scream. Her palms felt as if they were on fire, and she subconsciously wanted to let go. However, her firm willpower stopped this stupid instinctive impulse. She hurriedly retreated while circulating her inner strength to counteract the heat in her palms. Seeing that the opponent retreated after one strike, without any of the previous aggressiveness, Wu's spirit was greatly aroused. With a low roar, she pounced forward like a fierce tiger, descending the mountain. Li Xiaotian was dumbstruck at this scene and muttered to himself, "How can she be so powerful?" Yes, even with her experience, it was hard to imagine that Wu could turn the situation around in the blink of an eye and completely suppress Junko. If it was her, she would definitely not be able to do this. She stared at Marshall's palm with burning eyes and said, "Everything is strange because of the martial arts she cultivates. Who gave her this set of martial arts?" Suddenly, her heart moved, and her eyes turned, locking onto Tang Zheng. Could it be him? He was 100% sure that the martial sect did not have this set of techniques, so with the experience and connections of the martial sect, only Tang Zheng could do this. Isn't he a cultivator? Shouldn't he be holding spells and cultivation manuals? How can he martial arts manual? She was puzzled. Of course, she did not expect that the dragon seal on Tang Zheng's forehead could directly reach a treasure trove like Langya Pavilion. Li Xiaotian could not help but feel a trace of jealousy. Back then, she had been in contact with Tang Zheng for more days than Wu. Furthermore, they had gone through trials and tribulations together in the 10,000 mountains. If she did not become enemies with him because of his identity as a cultivator, then wouldn't this martial arts manual be hers? At that moment, she was a little jealous of Wu. How could Wu have such good luck? She came from behind and obtained such a huge benefit. She had mixed feelings, but she quickly threw these emotions out of her mind. That was because the battle between Tang Zheng and the imperial tutor had undergone a drastic change. The imperial tutor raised his arm even higher. Tang Zheng had not figured out the other party's intentions, but Li Xiaotian had already seen some clues. She looked at the stream behind the imperial tutor in shock. The stream seemed to be controlled by a terrifying force and had already stopped flowing. Crash! The stream suddenly soared into the air, turning into droplets of water. The droplets passed by the imperial tutor and shot straight towards the four symbols venerable. The water droplets condensed into lines that were like thousands of sharp swords. Thousands of swords shot out at the same time, slashing towards the four symbols venerable. The four symbols venerable's huge body had nowhere to hide. Tang Zheng also instantly realized the other party's intentions. Too powerful, he actually managed to draw the stream's water into swords. The four symbols venerable hurriedly placed one hand in front of his chest to protect himself. His other hand clenched into a fist and punched out. The air crackled like a sudden clap of thunder as a shock wave was sent forward. Boom, boom, boom. The shock wave struck the water swords, which immediately turned into droplets of water that scattered down. However, there were still some water swords that slipped through the net and ruthlessly slashed at the four symbols venerable's chest and arm. Sword after sword. The huge force caused the four symbols venerable to almost lose his balance. His huge body was on the verge of collapse. Tang Zheng could clearly sense the rumbling coming from the four symbols venerable's chest. It was like a sledgehammer had struck his arm, but it was also clearly transmitted through his arm to his chest. Ha! You can block it once, but can you block it a second time or a third time? Doesn't your Hua Xia have a saying that dripping water penetrates a stone? Today, I can test this saying, the imperial tutor proudly said, a faint and savage smile appearing on his face. Dripping water penetrates a stone. Tang Zheng was shaken. Wasn't the imperial tutor planning to use the soft to conquer the hard? dripping water penetrates a stone was not a legend. If the imperial tutor was allowed to continue his attacks, it was unknown whether this seemingly invulnerable for symbols venerable would be able to endure. Li Xiaotian had clearly seen this point, and her eyes grew more and more complicated. At this moment, Tang Zheng's defeat was of no benefit to her. The imperial tutor was clearly more ambitious than Tang Zheng and also more skilled at scheming. If the imperial tutor grew stronger, it would definitely do more harm than good to Huaxia and the Li Palace. Previously, she had been prepared to remain uninvolved, but the appearance of the Inferno Divine Palm made her realize that Tang Zheng was a massive treasure trove. If it fell into the imperial tutor's hands for nothing, it would be letting the imperial tutor own this treasure trove, which would be letting him off too easily. Lend a hand to Tang Zheng. A voice emerged from the bottom of her heart, but she did not rashly attack. The imperial tutor was too powerful, and with her meager abilities, the slightest carelessness would result in her being beheaded. She did not believe that at this crucial moment, the imperial tutor would care about her status as the holy maiden of the Li Palace. She stared at the battle, searching for an opportunity to strike. The four symbols, venerable, had already become a drowned rat. Its entire body was soaked, and even Xiao Bai on its shoulder was soaked. It fiercely shook its thin and small body, sending droplets of water into the air. It grinned and let out a long squeak. Tang Zheng knew that it was truly enraged, so he shouted, "Xiao Bai, attack!" In order to break the imperial tutor's attempt to break through the stone with dripping water, he could only use Xiao Bai as an elite force. Xiao Bai obeyed, and its squeaks suddenly became sharp and resounding. It raised its head and expanded its chest, its small mouth raised high. Its eyes turned fiery red, and the droplets of water on its body instantly evaporated. Boom! A fireball was spat out of its small mouth. However, this fireball did not rapidly fly forward. Instead, it floated in front of the four symbols venerable, constantly spinning as it absorbed the surrounding air. Gradually, the fireball began to grow at a visible rate. Fiery red replaced the color in front of it, and as far as the eye could see, everything was fiery red. When the water swords struck this ball of fire, they immediately evaporated into water vapor, finding it difficult to harm the four symbols venerable in the slightest. The imperial tutor's expression flickered at this sight, and he angrily said, "A little brat wants to influence the battle? Die!" Swoosh! Thousands of water swords suddenly condensed into a line, forming a gigantic water sword. With the stream as the source, it slashed at the fireball. Squeak! Whitey raised its neck and cried out loudly. Its snow-white fur immediately underwent an earth-shattering change, completely turning into a fiery red color. It was as if it had turned into a ball of fire. Boom! The water sword slashed at the fireball. Sparks and water splattered in all directions, overflowing with light and color. It was extremely beautiful. However, this beauty contained an earth-shattering danger. It was evident from the surrounding vegetation that was hit by the water droplets and sparks. The vegetation looked as if it had been shot by a machine gun and was in a complete mess. If a person was hit, the outcome would not be much better. The imperial tutor's expression was a little strange. He suddenly pointed his finger forward, and the stream water bubbled and boiled, quickly adding into the water sword. The fireball was sent flying backwards, almost crashing into the body of the four symbols venerable. Immediately, the imperial tutor revealed a smug look and said, "Now you know what it means to be a mantis trying to stop a chariot, right?" Xiao Bai ignored the imperial tutor's mockery. It yelled and leaped off the four symbols venerable's shoulder, crashing straight into the ball of fire. "Xiao Bai!" Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and could not help but cry out. He had never seen Xiaobai use this move, as if he was facing a great enemy. He did not know what this move meant, or if there was any danger. Seeing Xiaobai being engulfed by the flames, Tang Zheng was also enraged. He roared at the top of his lungs, "I'll fight it out with you." He took a deep breath, and true qi began to circulate wildly in his veins. In an instant, the air around his body began to vibrate, and his bones began to crackle. His hair and beard stood on end, and he looked like a mad lion. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at the imperial tutor. "Kachak!" Tang Zheng clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails almost sank into his flesh. At the same time, the four symbols Venerable also clenched his fists and stomped his feet on the ground. The stone slabs on the ground immediately cracked and shattered into pieces. "Kill!" Tang Zheng roared furiously. The four symbols Venerable's huge body was like a cannonball that had been fired, charging straight at the imperial tutor. The four symbols knight passed through the fireball and the water sword and charged directly at the imperial tutor's body. Two huge fists were like two meteors flying from outer space.